The illusion of asymmetric insight is the deeply unsettling belief that we understand others far better than they understand us. It's the quiet conviction that we can read people's intentions, hidden fears, and unspoken motives while they remain largely blind to the complexities of our own minds. This illusion makes us feel like mind readers, peering behind the curtain of someone else's thoughts while protecting our own inner world as mysterious and impenetrable. Illusion of asymmetric insight. It begins subtly. You might observe someone's behavior and assign meaning to their expressions, their hesitations, their tone. You interpret their silence as guilt, their confidence as arrogance, their friendliness as manipulation. And the more certain you become of your insight, the more you believe they can't possibly see you with the same clarity. After all, you know your own intentions. You've lived your history. You understand the reasons behind your choices. How could they? This illusion thrives in conflict. You see their flaws, their biases, their blind spots. But when they point out yours, you feel misunderstood, mischaracterized, even attacked. You believe your actions are justified and layered with nuance, while theirs seem obvious and one-dimensional. It leads to the breakdown of empathy because it becomes easier to judge others than to truly understand them. Psychologically, this illusion inflates the ego while sabotaging relationships. It makes intimacy harder because true connection requires vulnerability, accepting that others might know us better than we want to believe. The illusion of asymmetric insight seduces us into believing we're safer behind our own eyes, while isolating us in the very misunderstandings we think we're avoiding. Empathy gap. The empathy gap is a brutal mental illusion that causes us to underestimate the power of emotions, both in ourselves and in others. It blinds us to how drastically our decisions, judgments, and beliefs shift depending on whether we're calm, angry, afraid, hungry, or in pain. We think we're consistent, rational beings. We are not. The empathy gap exposes that lie. When we're in a cold emotional state, logical, relaxed, detached, we forget how overwhelming hot states can be. We forget how impossible it feels to resist temptation when lust takes over. We underestimate how rage can drown out reason, how fear rewrites our priorities, how pain shrinks our world to a single aching point. And then, from this cold state, we judge others. We judge the addict for relapsing, the anxious for freezing up, the depressed for staying in bed. We say, why don't they just stop? Why can't they push through it? Why can't they think clearly? But when we enter that same emotional storm, when grief hits, when panic grips, when desire hijacks our mind, we realize the truth too late. It's not that easy, not even close. The empathy gap works both ways. When we're emotional, we forget what calm felt like. A suicidal person can't remember what hope felt like. A heartbroken person can't imagine joy returning. A terrified mind believes the danger will never end. This illusion is cruel because it isolates us in our moments of greatest need. It makes us think no one understands. And worse, it makes us incapable of understanding ourselves. Projection bias. Projection bias is the sneaky illusion that convinces us our current thoughts, emotions, and desires are permanent, that who we are in this exact moment is who we'll always be. We project our present state onto our future selves, assuming they'll think, feel, and want exactly what we do right now, but they won't, and that mistake costs us more than we know. When you're full, you forget what hunger feels like. When you're in love, you think that passion will last forever. When you're tired, the future looks hopeless. When you're energized, you overcommit. The mind tricks us into believing our future self is just a more advanced version of our current self, not a stranger with different needs, moods, and motivations. This illusion drives impulsive decisions and wrecks long-term plans. It's why we overeat, overspend, or overpromise. Why we buy gym memberships in December and cancel in February, why we commit to things we don't actually want just because we wanted them in that one temporary emotional high. Projection bias distorts how we interpret others too. If we're feeling generous, we assume others are acting out of kindness. If we're angry, we see threats everywhere. We stop seeing things as they are and instead see them as we are. It's not just a thinking error, it's an emotional betrayal, because when the future arrives and we don't feel the same, regret floods in. We wonder, what was I thinking? The truth is, you weren't thinking like your future self at all. You were trapped in now, mistaking a moment for a lifetime. Naive cynicism. Naive cynicism is the corrosive illusion that leads us to believe others are more self-serving, manipulative, or biased than they truly are. While we, of course, are the reasonable exception, it tells us that people are always driven by hidden agendas, that kindness is a strategy, that generosity comes with strings attached. It breeds mistrust where none may be deserved, and it slowly erodes our ability to connect with others. At first, it feels like wisdom, like protection. If you assume the worst in people, you can't be caught off guard. You think you're just being realistic. You think you're guarding your heart. But underneath, it's fear pretending to be clarity. Naive cynicism makes you see manipulation in honesty, selfishness in compromise, and deception in disagreement. When someone offers help, you wonder what they're getting out of it. When someone disagrees, you assume they're being difficult just to win. This illusion poisons relationships. It makes cooperation feel like a game of suspicion. It destroys trust before it has a chance to grow. And the worst part? It's self-fulfilling. If you treat others like they're acting in bad faith, they start to feel defensive, guarded, even hostile, proving your illusion right, not because it was true, but because you made it true. Naive cynicism convinces us we're immune to bias, even as it clouds our every interaction. It whispers that others are irrational, corrupted by ego or agenda, while we alone are clear-eyed. But this is the lie that keeps us lonely, the belief that everyone else is playing a game and we're the only one not cheating. Naive realism. Naive realism is the haunting illusion that our perception of the world is the world, that what we see is truth, what we believe is fact, and anyone who disagrees must be ignorant, biased, or deceived. It's the stubborn conviction that we are objective while others are misled. It feels like clarity, but it's a trap, a mental prison built from the illusion that our view is the default setting of reality. You believe your memories are accurate, your judgments are fair, your logic is clean, but when someone challenges your beliefs, you don't think, maybe they have a different perspective. You think they just don't get it. When others hold opposing political views, religious beliefs, or moral values, you assume they're uninformed or irrational, never that they might be seeing something you're blind to. This illusion is seductive because it flatters the ego. It tells you that you've done the thinking, the observing, the hard work, that you've landed on the truth. It turns disagreements into moral failings. It makes compromise feel like betrayal. It fuels outrage, tribalism, and contempt, because once you're convinced you see things as they are, anyone who sees differently becomes a threat to the truth. Naive realism doesn't just divide people, it calcifies the mind. It makes you less curious, less empathetic, and less willing to grow. And worst of all, it's invisible while it's happening. You don't know you're under its spell. You just feel right. You feel justified. But that confidence isn't clarity. It's the echo chamber of your own mind, pretending to be reality. The Backfire Effect. The Backfire Effect is the maddening illusion that when people are shown evidence that contradicts their deeply held beliefs, they will revise their thinking. But in reality, the opposite often happens. They double down. Facts don't always change minds. Sometimes they harden them. Imagine gently showing someone a mountain of proof that their belief is wrong. Maybe it's political, Maybe it's about health, religion, or identity. You present the data calmly, rationally, and instead of thanking you or reconsidering, they get defensive, angry. They cling tighter to the very idea you tried to disprove. That's the backfire effect in action. It reveals something unsettling about the human brain. When our beliefs are challenged, we don't treat it like a conversation. We treat it like a threat, and threats trigger survival instincts, not open-mindedness. This illusion is especially dangerous because it makes truth feel unreachable. It's why debates rarely end with someone saying, "You're right, I've changed my mind." Our beliefs are tied to our identity. Questioning them feels like questioning who we are. So when someone tries to pull us toward truth, we feel like we're being dragged toward annihilation. The backfire effect fuels tribalism. It keeps people locked in echo chambers, unable to hear anything that doesn't already match their worldview. It makes persuasion feel impossible and divides feel eternal. And worst of all, it makes us believe others are hopelessly irrational while we stay blind to the fact that we do it too. Because the backfire effect doesn't just hijack their brain, it hijacks yours. The misattribution of arousal. The misattribution of arousal is a disorienting illusion in which your brain confuses the true source of your emotions. Your heart races, your palms sweat, your adrenaline spikes, and instead of recognizing the real cause, your mind scrambles to attach that physical response to something nearby, something convenient, something wrong. It's emotional mislabeling at its most deceptive. Imagine walking across a swaying suspension bridge. Your body is flooded with fear, elevated heart rate, shallow breathing, heightened awareness. But then you meet someone at the other end and feel an unexpected surge of attraction. You're convinced it's chemistry, fate, maybe even love. But it's not. It's your body's fear response bleeding into your perception of another person. Your brain, desperate to make sense of the physical symptoms, assigns them to what's in front of you, misidentifying the danger as desire. This illusion doesn't just apply to romance. It strikes in anger, excitement, sadness, and even joy. You might lash out at someone because your stress was building from another source. You might feel deeply connected to someone during a crisis, only to realize later it was the chaos talking, not compatibility. We don't feel emotions in isolation. We feel them physically, but our minds are terrible at tracing where they actually come from. Misattribution of arousal manipulates memory, relationships, decisions. It tricks us into chasing the wrong things, blaming the wrong people, trusting the wrong feelings. It reveals how vulnerable we are to the stories we invent to explain ourselves, stories that can be wildly, dangerously wrong, all because we felt something we didn't understand. The cheerleader effect. The cheerleader effect is the strange and subtle illusion that people appear more attractive when they're in a group than when they're alone. It's why someone who didn't catch your eye in isolation suddenly seems magnetic when surrounded by friends. It's not just your imagination, it's a glitch in how the brain processes faces, and it distorts everything from romantic choices to hiring decisions. When we see a group of people, our brain quickly creates an average of the faces it sees, a composite blend that smooths out flaws and exaggerates symmetry. This average face is processed as more attractive, and then, bizarrely, that glow is transferred back to each individual. The result? Everyone in the group appears more appealing than they actually are. The illusion plays a trick on your perception before you even know it's happening. This becomes even more powerful when the group looks cohesive, same mood, posture, or clothing style. Your brain reads that harmony as confidence, as social validation. If they belong in this group, it whispers, they must be likable, worth noticing, safe to admire. Suddenly, your judgment isn't based on the person in front of you. It's based on who's standing beside them. The cheerleader effect doesn't just influence attraction, it affects credibility, charm, even perceived competence. A mediocre speaker in a powerful-looking team seems sharper, A forgettable candidate in a group interview feels more trustworthy. This illusion proves something haunting. How we look alone can change entirely depending on the company we keep and how easily our brain mistakes belonging for beauty. Hot hand fallacy. The hot hand fallacy is the thrilling and deeply misleading illusion that someone on a winning streak is on fire and that their success will inevitably continue simply because it already has. It's the electrifying belief that momentum is real, that luck transforms into destiny, and that performance streaks are self-sustaining forces. And it feels so real, especially when we're the ones riding the wave. You watch a basketball player sink 3 shots in a row, and your heart races. You just know the 4th will go in. You see a trader pick 3 winning stocks, and you believe he has the Midas touch. You hit the jackpot once, and suddenly, the slot machine feels like it wants to pay you again. That sense of rhythm, of flow, of something magical happening, it's an illusion, a trap. The hot hand fallacy is your brain grasping for patterns in chaos. It's driven by our deep discomfort with randomness. We crave predictability, control, meaning, and so we invent it. But success in many areas, especially games of chance, is statistically independent. Previous outcomes don't influence future ones. That 4th shot isn't more likely to land just because the last 3 did, but the illusion whispers otherwise, louder with every win. This belief doesn't just distort how we see others, it warps our self-perception. When we feel hot, we take bigger risks, assume greater confidence, and mistake luck for skill. And when the streak ends, as it always does, it feels like betrayal. We blame ourselves, even though we were chasing a mirage. The fallacy makes you feel unstoppable right before it makes you fall. Risk compensation. Risk compensation is the unsettling illusion that the safer we feel, the riskier we behave. It flips our logic upside down, where safety features, protections, or reassurances don't necessarily make us act more carefully, but instead embolden us to take bigger chances, push harder, and let our guard down. It's the mind's hidden bargaining chip. The safer we believe we are, the more reckless we become. Imagine getting into a car equipped with anti-lock brakes, airbags, lane assist, and crash detection. You'd think you'd drive more cautiously, but studies show the opposite. Many people drive faster, brake harder, and follow more closely, all because their subconscious whispers, "You're covered. You can afford to push it." The safety net doesn't prevent danger, it invites it. This illusion infects every area of life. When people wear bike helmets, they may weave through traffic more aggressively. When someone feels emotionally bulletproof in a relationship, they might stop communicating or take their partner for granted. Even using condoms or safety harnesses can lead to riskier sexual or athletic behavior, not because people want to be reckless, but because they believe the danger has been neutralized. Risk compensation is dangerous because it gives us a false sense of immunity. It tricks us into confusing protection with permission. It's the psychological blind spot that whispers, "You're fine, you can push further, nothing will happen." But the truth is, the more layers of safety we add, the more we need to stay awake, because the illusion of safety is sometimes more dangerous than the risk itself. Moral Credential Effect. The Moral Credential Effect is the deceptive illusion that past good deeds give us psychological permission to behave badly or less virtuously without guilt. It's a dangerous mental loophole where morality becomes a currency we believe we can spend, as if righteousness earned today can justify wrongdoing tomorrow. And the most disturbing part, we often don't even realize we're doing it. You donate to charity, then feel justified treating a service worker rudely. You speak up for a social cause, and later dismiss someone's genuine concern with arrogance. You vote for diversity, and then feel immune to accusations of bias. The good thing you did becomes a shield, one you use to silence your conscience. It's not that you've stopped caring about right and wrong, it's that your brain tricks you into thinking you've already proven you're a good person. So, what's the harm in bending the rules just a little? This illusion doesn't just corrupt individuals, it poisons systems. A company with a history of public philanthropy may feel less pressure to reform its toxic internal culture. A person who prides themselves on being progressive might resist feedback, claiming, "I can't be part of the problem. I've always been one of the good ones." But morality isn't a point system, it's a practice. And the moment we use our past goodness as a hall pass, we slip into self-deception. The moral credential effect is seductive because it relieves us of guilt. It tells us we've earned a break from accountability. But the truth is harsher. The moment we stop questioning our goodness, we start becoming the very thing we swore we weren't. Bias blind spot. The bias blind spot is the chilling illusion that we are less biased than everyone else. It's the mental blindfold that keeps us from seeing the smudges on our own lens while we point out the distortions in everyone else's. You see others falling for stereotypes, overreacting emotionally, ignoring facts. But when you do the same, it feels like logic. It feels like truth. It feels like you're the only one seeing clearly. This illusion is deeply rooted in ego. Admitting bias feels like admitting weakness, like confessing you're not in control of your own mind. So instead, we believe that bias is what they have. They're emotional, they're irrational, they're blinded by politics, by ignorance, by their upbringing. But you're neutral, objective, the exception to human psychology. But you're not. The bias blind spot doesn't mean we never spot our own biases. It means we systematically downplay them. Even when we acknowledge them intellectually, we believe they affect us far less than they do others. This illusion fuels judgment, division, and arrogance. It makes you trust your conclusions too deeply and question others too little. It silences curiosity because if you're already right, why explore further? And the most dangerous part? Knowing about the bias blind spot doesn't fix it. In fact, research shows that people who learn about it often turn the insight outward, thinking, wow, other people really do this a lot. That's how cunning this illusion is. It doesn't just hide in your mind. It hides in your awareness of your mind. It makes you confident in your objectivity, even as it pulls your strings. Just world hypothesis. The just world hypothesis is a comforting, seductive illusion. The belief that the world is fair, that people get what they deserve and deserve what they get. It whispers that justice is woven into the fabric of reality, that goodness is rewarded and cruelty is punished, and that everything happens for a reason. It offers emotional safety in a chaotic world, but that safety comes at a devastating cost. When you see someone suffer, your first instinct might be to search for what they did to deserve it. You see a homeless person and assume poor choices. You hear about a victim of assault and wonder what they did to provoke it. You witness someone fail and convince yourself they simply didn't try hard enough. Because if bad things happen to good people, then the world isn't fair, and that thought is unbearable. So your mind rewrites the story. Victims become responsible. Pain becomes earned. This illusion doesn't just distort how we see others. It slowly corrodes our empathy. It turns compassion into suspicion. Instead of asking, how can I help? We ask, what did they do wrong? And when injustice strikes you, when the illness comes, when the betrayal lands, when the dream collapses, you may find yourself crushed not only by grief, but by shame. What did I do to deserve this, you ask, not realizing you're a prisoner of the very illusion you clung to for comfort. The just world hypothesis feels like a shield, but it's a double-edged sword. It protects you from fear by sacrificing your humanity. And once you start believing the world is fair, you start forgetting how often it isn't. Illusion of external agency. The illusion of external agency is a haunting mental trick that convinces us our own thoughts, actions, or sensations are being caused by something or someone outside of ourselves. It's the eerie feeling that some invisible force is steering the wheel, that the anger that surged in your chest came from what they said, that the mistake you made wasn't really yours, that the voice in your head isn't entirely your own. At its core, this illusion is a rupture in ownership. The mind, in moments of confusion, stress, or trauma, mislabels its own internal processes as external intrusions. You feel your arm move and swear it wasn't you. You make a decision impulsively and blame it on pressure, on fate, on divine will. Even everyday experiences, like blaming a slip of the tongue on being forced into saying it, are tiny echoes of this illusion. In extreme forms, it manifests as delusions in psychiatric conditions, where people believe their thoughts are being planted by governments, spirits, or technology. But even mentally healthy people experience this in subtle, socially accepted ways. We say, "I lost control. I don't know what came over me. You made me do this," because it's easier to assign agency to something outside than to confront the darker parts of ourselves. This illusion protects the ego. It buffers us from guilt, from shame, from terrifying self-realizations. But it comes at a cost. It disempowers us, because the more we believe someone else is pulling the strings, the less control we claim over our lives, and the more we become haunted by the feeling that we're not fully home inside our own minds. Identifiable victim effect. The identifiable victim effect is the gut-wrenching illusion that one vivid personal story moves us more than 1,000 faceless statistics ever could. It reveals a painful truth. Our empathy isn't logical, it's emotional. We care more deeply about the suffering of a single known person than the mass suffering of many. And that imbalance shapes everything from our charity to our justice. You hear about a little girl named Amina starving in a refugee camp. You see her photograph, big eyes, fragile hands, a soft plea for help, and your heart shatters. You feel compelled to donate, to act, to do something. But when you hear that 50,000 children are starving in the same region, the impact fades. The numbers feel abstract, distant, unreal. Your compassion, once burning, goes cold. The tragedy didn't shrink, but your emotional connection did. This illusion doesn't mean we're cruel. It means we're wired for intimacy. We evolved to respond to individuals, not numbers. Our ancestors didn't need to comprehend the suffering of entire populations. They needed to protect their tribe, their child, the person in front of them. But in today's world, this wiring betrays us. It makes us ignore mass injustice because it doesn't feel personal. It lets us walk past systemic suffering while we cry over a single, well-told story. The identifiable victim effect shapes media, politics, and social movements. It's why one viral tragedy can spark outrage, while silent genocides continue unnoticed. It's why we save one dog from a well, but scroll past the extinction of species. This illusion doesn't just decide who we help, it decides who we see. Pseudo-Certainty Effect. The Pseudo-Certainty Effect is a quiet, seductive illusion that makes us crave certainty, even when it's fake. It tricks us into making irrational choices just because one option feels more definite than another, even if it actually carries more risk. It hijacks our decision-making by replacing logic with emotional comfort, whispering, "Pick the safer path," even when that safety is an illusion. Imagine being told you have a choice. You can either take a guaranteed $30 or gamble with an 80% chance to win $45 and a 20% chance to get nothing. Many people choose the sure $30. Now, imagine the same gamble in reverse. You'll either definitely lose $30 or take an 80% chance of losing $45 and a 20% chance to lose nothing. Suddenly, people gamble, choosing the risky option to avoid the definite loss. The outcomes are mathematically identical, but our decisions aren't rational. They're emotional. We run from uncertainty in gains, but chase it in losses, all to feel in control. This illusion is dangerous because it feels like wisdom. It makes us think we're being cautious, strategic, or prudent, but we're not weighing outcomes. We're reacting to how options are framed. We're clinging to a sense of control that doesn't exist. In relationships, business, politics, we reject better long-term strategies because a worse short-term option offers fake clarity. We accept bad deals, stay in toxic jobs, and vote for fear-based promises, all because they feel certain. The pseudo-certainty effect doesn't just distort choice, it manipulates hope and fear, and in the end, it trades what could be for the hollow comfort of what seems safe. Effort justification. Effort justification is the deeply human illusion that the more pain, time, or energy we pour into something, the more valuable and meaningful it must be. It's our mind's desperate attempt to make suffering feel worth it, because the alternative, that we worked, sacrificed, endured, and lost for something trivial or empty, is too devastating to bear. You train for years in a toxic job, telling yourself the stress and exhaustion are proof it matters. You stay in a failing relationship, clinging to the time invested as evidence it's still worth saving. You defend a belief, not because it's right, but because you fought so hard to believe it. The more you struggle, the more you convince yourself that the outcome must be special, because if it isn't, then all that suffering was for nothing. This illusion is fueled by cognitive dissonance, the discomfort of holding two conflicting truths. I went through hell, and it wasn't worth it. To relieve that tension, the brain rewrites the narrative. We convince ourselves the reward is greater, the cause more noble, the goal more meaningful. We inflate the value to match the cost. It's why cults use hazing rituals, why elite institutions demand grueling admissions processes, why abusive relationships are so hard to leave. The pain must mean something. Otherwise, we were just victims of our own choices. That thought is unbearable, so we justify the effort instead. Effort justification doesn't just distort our past, it locks us into toxic cycles. It keeps us grinding for validation, suffering for illusions, clinging to meaning we created only to avoid admitting we were wrong. False uniqueness effect. The false uniqueness effect is the intoxicating illusion that our strengths, values, and positive traits are rare, that we are somehow more moral, more talented, more insightful than the average person. It flatters our ego, painting us as unique in ways that make us feel exceptional. And while it feels empowering, it secretly isolates us, warps our self-image, and fuels quiet disconnection from others. You believe your generosity is uncommon, that your integrity sets you apart, that your creativity, your loyalty, your pain, no one else quite gets it the way you do. It's comforting to think that your compassion is deeper, your love more genuine, your insight more profound. And when others fail to act like you don't see it as difference. You see it as deficiency. Why don't they care as much? Why aren't they trying harder? This illusion gives you pride, but it robs you of empathy. It makes you feel alone in your values, as if you're surrounded by people who just don't understand or don't measure up. It turns connection into a one-way street. You start to think you're carrying more weight, doing more emotional labor, being the better one, and that's exhausting, not because it's true, but because you believe no one else is even trying. The false uniqueness effect masks itself as confidence, but it's often fear. Fear of being ordinary, of blending in, of being replaceable. But the truth is, you're not alone in your goodness. Others love as deeply. Others try as hard. Others care just as much. You just can't always see it, because your illusion keeps you looking in the mirror instead of out the window. Fourier Effect. The Fourier Effect, also known as the Barnum Effect, is the haunting illusion that a vague, general statement is shockingly accurate because you desperately want it to be. It's the eerie feeling you get when reading a horoscope or taking a personality test and thinking, this is so me. But it isn't. Not really. It's an emotional trap dressed as self-discovery, and it works because it flatters you into believing you're being seen. This illusion preys on our need for identity, understanding, and control. When someone tells you, you're the kind of person who loves deeply but hides your pain, it hits hard, not because it's uniquely true, but because it's universally applicable. Almost anyone could see themselves in it, and because it feels personal, we assign it meaning. We trust the source. We let it shape how we see ourselves. The Fourier effect is how fortune tellers earn trust, how scam psychics build cult-like followings. It's how personality quizzes go viral, how manipulation sneaks through the cracks, how snake oil is sold in the language of destiny. The illusion doesn't just deceive, it seduces. It gives you a mirror that's been carefully fogged to show you what you want to see, not what's really there. And once you believe the illusion, it becomes a foundation. You make choices based on it. You judge others by it. You become attached to a version of yourself that might not even exist, all because a few carefully chosen words made you feel understood, when in reality, they understood everyone and no one all at once. Perseverance bias. Perseverance bias is the stubborn, haunting illusion that once we've formed a belief, especially one tied to identity, morality, or pride, it becomes nearly impossible to let go, even when the evidence collapses beneath it. It's the invisible chain that tethers us to outdated ideas, wrong assumptions, and broken narratives, not because they're still true, but because they once felt right. You might believe someone is untrustworthy based on a single mistake, and even when they prove themselves, you hold on to your suspicion. You hear a false rumor, later learn it's a lie, but still feel its echo shape how you see that person. You make a bad decision based on faulty data, and even after learning the truth, you defend it, justifying it with emotion instead of logic. That's perseverance bias at work, anchoring you to beliefs long after the foundation has rotted away. This illusion doesn't just resist change, it fears it. Letting go of a belief means admitting you were wrong, and the ego hates that. So it doubles down. It filters new information to fit the old view. It explains away contradictions. It clings. And over time, you forget what led you to believe in the first place. All that remains is conviction, hollow but stubborn. Perseverance bias ruins relationships, blinds us in arguments, and stunts growth. It traps us in outdated roles, old grudges, toxic narratives, and it convinces us we're being consistent, principled, loyal to the truth. But the truth doesn't fear change. Only pride does. And when pride becomes your compass, you'll stay lost, fighting to defend a map that no longer leads anywhere. Illusion of control. The illusion of control is the seductive and often devastating belief that we have more influence over outcomes than we actually do. It's the comforting lie that lets us think we can steer the chaos, that our choices shape every result, that success or failure rests neatly in our hands, and sometimes that lie is the only thing keeping us sane. You roll the dice harder in a game, thinking it increases your chances. You press an elevator button repeatedly, convinced it'll arrive faster. You study harder, pray louder, plan more obsessively, believing that effort alone can bend fate. But life doesn't work like that. There are accidents, there are variables, there are forces bigger than us, indifferent to our plans. Still, the mind clings to control because helplessness is unbearable. This illusion is most powerful in moments of uncertainty. When someone gets sick, we obsess over diet, stress, genetics, anything that might explain it, anything that gives us a sense of order. If we can trace the cause, maybe we can prevent it. When we fail, we look for what we did wrong, even when the truth is, we just got unlucky. Control gives us the illusion of safety. It allows us to believe we can prevent heartbreak, loss, disaster, if only we make the right moves. But the dark side of this illusion is guilt. If you think you control everything, then every failure becomes your fault. Every tragedy becomes punishment. The illusion doesn't just comfort you, it crucifies you. It turns randomness into responsibility, and sometimes that belief hurts more than the truth ever could. Spotlight Effect. The spotlight effect is the agonizing illusion that everyone is watching you, judging you, noticing every awkward stumble, every pimple, every word you regret saying. It convinces you that a single moment of embarrassment is a performance witnessed and remembered by the entire world. It makes your shame louder, your anxiety sharper, and your confidence smaller, all because you believe you're under a spotlight that doesn't actually exist. You walk into a room with a stain on your shirt and feel like it's glowing. You fumble a sentence in a meeting and imagine the judgment burning into your skin. You replay a social misstep, convinced that everyone else is replaying it too. But here's the truth. They're not. Most people didn't notice, and if they did, they forgot almost instantly. Why? Because they are under their own spotlight, just like you. The spotlight effect is born from self-centered perception, not vanity, but vulnerability. We see ourselves from the inside out, constantly aware of our every move, so we assume others do too. But the truth is sobering and freeing. Most people are too busy thinking about themselves to obsess over you. They didn't catch that your voice cracked. They didn't notice you tripped over your words. They're worried about their own stain, their own stumble, their own spotlight. This illusion keeps people silent in class, out of love, away from risk. It builds cages from imagined eyes. But once you see it for what it is, a trick of the anxious mind, you realize the spotlight was never on you. It was always in your head. The Dunning-Kruger Effect. The Dunning-Kruger Effect is the chilling illusion that the less we know, the more confident we become. It's the cruel paradox where ignorance doesn't breed humility, it breeds certainty. And that certainty is blinding. It makes us speak louder, argue harder, and dismiss others with a kind of arrogance born not from mastery, but from the very absence of it. You've seen it before. The beginner who thinks they've cracked the code, the coworker who boldly critiques work they barely understand, the friend who proclaims themselves an expert after watching a few videos or reading one article. They don't realize the depth of the subject, the complexity, the nuance, because they've never gone deep enough to see what they're missing. Their knowledge is shallow, but their confidence runs ocean deep. This illusion is not just frustrating, it's dangerous. It fuels misinformation, reckless leadership, bad decisions. It's why armchair experts speak with more conviction than seasoned professionals. It's why people resist learning, because learning humbles you. The more you understand, the more you realize how much you don't know. True experts often doubt themselves, while the uninformed are loud, absolute, and unshakable. What makes the Dunning-Kruger effect so tragic is that it keeps people stuck. If you're overconfident in your ignorance, you never seek growth. You don't ask questions, you don't listen, you don't evolve. And when everyone around you seems unsure, precisely because they understand the complexity, you mistake your arrogance for insight. You think you're right, but in truth, you're lost and too confident to even know it. Choice supportive bias. Choice supportive bias is the mind's comforting illusion that the decisions we've already made were better than they actually were. It's the mental rewrite that happens after a choice. When logic fades and justification kicks in, you don't just remember why you picked something, you begin to believe it was the best choice, even when it wasn't, even when the evidence says otherwise. You choose a partner, a job, a political stance, and suddenly, your brain starts polishing the good parts and erasing the flaws. You exaggerate the benefits, minimize the drawbacks, and convince yourself it was the obvious, correct decision all along. And the more emotionally invested you are in the choice, the stronger the illusion becomes. It's not about truth anymore, it's about protecting your identity. This bias is a defense mechanism because admitting a mistake feels like admitting you are flawed. The ego hates that. So instead, your memory shifts. You start to believe the product you bought was higher quality, that the movie you picked was more entertaining, that your ex really wasn't that bad. The mind edits reality to soothe your discomfort and preserve your sense of competence. But this illusion doesn't just blur the past, it shapes the future. It makes us double down on bad decisions. It makes us defend poor choices. It keeps us stuck in regret-proof versions of our own lives. We don't just want to be right, we want to have been right, even if we weren't. And so the lie lives on, hidden in the memories we trust the most. Memory inhibition. Memory inhibition is the haunting illusion that forgotten memories are gone because they were unimportant. But the truth is far more unsettling. Your brain doesn't just forget, it hides, it buries, it selectively silences thoughts that threaten your stability, your identity, or your emotional safety. And the scariest part? You don't even realize it's happening. You forget the argument that made you question your relationship. You misplace the details of that night you drank too much and crossed the line. You blank on moments of humiliation, betrayal, or guilt, not because they didn't matter, but because they mattered too much. Your mind, acting like a self-appointed gatekeeper, locks them away to keep you functioning. It doesn't erase them, it just makes them harder to find. This illusion keeps you sane, but it also keeps you stuck. When your past trauma subtly influences your decisions, fears, and relationships, but you can't access the memory, it feels like being haunted by a ghost you can't name. You feel a certain way around someone and can't explain why. You avoid certain places or people and justify it with logic, not realizing it's pain you've buried surfacing in disguise. Memory inhibition protects, but at a price. It can fracture identity, distort truth, and create blind spots that sabotage your future. And because the brain often forgets that it forgot, you walk through life unaware that entire pieces of your emotional puzzle are missing, not lost, but hidden, just beneath the surface, waiting for the moment you're ready or brave enough to remember. Frequency illusion. The frequency illusion is the uncanny, almost eerie sensation that something you just noticed, an idea, a name, a number, a song, is suddenly everywhere. You hear about a rare medical condition, and now it shows up in every conversation. You learn a new word, and it appears in books, news articles, street signs. You start seeing the same car model on every road right after buying it. It feels like the universe is whispering, "Pay attention," but it's not. It's your brain playing a trick. This illusion, also known as the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, happens in two stages. First, you encounter something novel. Your brain flags it as important. Then, without you realizing it, your attention becomes hyper-tuned to that thing. It hasn't suddenly increased in frequency. You've just started noticing it. And because your awareness is heightened, it feels like the world is changing around you, reflecting what's on your mind. But the only thing that changed is your filter. The frequency illusion is incredibly convincing because it hits at a deep emotional level. It feels like fate, like confirmation, like a sign. It reinforces beliefs, fuels superstitions, even drives conspiracy theories. You believe you're being guided, warned, or validated, when in truth your brain is just noticing what it used to ignore. This illusion shows how powerful your perception is and how easily it can be hijacked. You don't see the world as it is, you see what your mind is looking for, and sometimes that makes patterns appear where there are none. You think it's synchronicity. It's just your brain whispering back what it thinks you want to see. Gambler's conceit. Gambler's conceit is the intoxicating illusion that you'll walk away right after the next win. It's the quiet voice that whispers, "Just one more," even as everything unravels. It convinces you that you're in control, that you can stop anytime you want, and that lie is exactly how people lose everything. You start small, a few dollars, a harmless risk, a little thrill, then you win. Your heart races, the lights feel brighter, and suddenly you're alive in a way nothing else gives you. But then comes the loss. And the belief kicks in. I'll win it back. I know how this works. I'll leave after I'm even. But you don't, because each loss deepens the need to chase. Each near miss feels like a promise. You think you're due. You think luck owes you something. This illusion feeds on ego. You tell yourself you're smarter than the odds, more disciplined than the others, that you'll stop before it gets bad. But every gambler thinks that. And every gambler watches the door get farther away the longer they stay. Gamblers' conceit is what makes addicts look calm even as they drown. It's not denial, it's faith in a fantasy. The trap isn't just in casinos, it's in relationships. You swear you'll leave after one last fight. In careers, you'll quit after one last promotion. In dreams, you'll abandon after one last failure. The gambler's conceit tells you that you are the exception, that you'll know when to walk away. But by the time you realize the game owns you, you're already too far in to fold. Zero risk bias. Zero risk bias is the deeply emotional illusion that eliminating one source of risk entirely is better than reducing multiple, larger risks by a greater amount. It's the mind's obsession with absolute safety. No matter how irrational or costly that pursuit may be, we are drawn to certainty, even if it means ignoring smarter, more impactful choices. We don't just want to reduce danger, we want to erase it, and that craving can blind us. Imagine you're given a choice: reduce a major threat by 50% or eliminate a small threat completely. Most people go for zero. It feels clean, final, safe. We'd rather lock one door entirely than leave 5 others half closed, even if more danger comes through the half-open ones, because zero risk feels like control. It gives us a sense of power over the chaos we fear but can't always predict. This illusion thrives in medicine, policy, and everyday decisions. We spend billions eliminating a rare side effect while ignoring deadlier, more common causes of harm. We obsess over cybersecurity for one file while the whole system is exposed elsewhere. We sanitize one surface while touching 100 more. Zero risk becomes the goal, not better outcomes, not smarter trade-offs, just the feeling of total elimination. But that feeling is a trap. Life doesn't offer guarantees. The world is built on probabilities, not absolutes, and the pursuit of zero often leads us to waste time, money, and energy while ignoring what actually matters. Zero risk bias doesn't keep us safer, it just keeps us feeling safe, and sometimes that illusion is the most dangerous risk of all. Unit bias. Unit bias is the silent illusion that whatever amount we're given, whatever unit something comes in, is the appropriate amount. It tricks us into consuming, accepting, or completing a task simply because it's been served to us that way. One plate, one bottle, one serving, one task. If it's packaged that way, it must be right. Right? You pour cereal into a giant bowl and eat all of it, not because you're still hungry, but because it's one bowl. You finish the whole candy bar because it's one bar, not thinking that it's actually 3 servings crammed into one wrapper. You keep scrolling endlessly because one session on social media doesn't seem like something you can stop halfway through. Unit bias doesn't just shape what we eat, it shapes how we live. This illusion hijacks your sense of control. It makes you consume more, do more, endure more, not based on need, but based on presentation. If a project is handed to you as one assignment, you feel obligated to finish it in one go, even if it drains you. If someone pours you a full glass of wine, you drink it, even if you didn't want that much. You aren't following hunger, energy, or logic. You're following packaging. Unit bias is dangerous because it feels harmless. It hides in plain sight, disguising consumption as completion. But when you finish something just because it was served in a single unit, not because you needed it, you give away your autonomy to an illusion. And the scariest part, you rarely even notice it happening. Automation bias. Automation bias is the dangerously deceptive illusion that machines, algorithms, GPS systems, AI tools, or automated systems are inherently more reliable than human judgment. It's the blind trust we place in technology simply because it feels objective, precise, and infallible, and that trust, when left unchecked, can lead to catastrophic errors, not because the machines failed, but because we stopped thinking. You see it in the pilot who overlooks a failing instrument because the autopilot shows everything is fine, in the doctor who follows an algorithm's recommendation even when a patient's symptoms scream otherwise, in the driver who follows GPS directions straight into a lake. We've been trained to believe that if a machine says it, it must be right. Our role becomes passive. We stop questioning. We stop noticing. And slowly, our instincts dull. Automation bias doesn't come from laziness. It comes from fear and awe. Fear of human error, awe at digital precision. We assume the algorithm knows more, sees more, thinks faster, and often it does. But when it doesn't, when it's wrong, outdated, biased, or simply misinformed, we follow anyway. Because challenging a human feels manageable. Challenging a machine feels like heresy. This illusion is seductive because it promises freedom from doubt. Just press the button, follow the screen, trust the system. But that surrender comes at a cost. Your awareness, your agency, your accountability. Automation bias doesn't just weaken judgment, it replaces it. And when something goes wrong, it leaves us asking a question that chills the spine. Why didn't I notice? The answer is simple, because we thought the machine already had. Time-saving bias. Time-saving bias is the deceptive illusion that we can save more time than we actually do, or that certain choices will only take a second when they end up costing much more. It's a trick of perception that makes us underestimate how long things will take and overestimate how efficient we really are. And it's how we end up late, overwhelmed, and stressed. Again and again, you glance at traffic and think, if I just speed a little, I'll save 5 minutes. But the math doesn't work like that. Shaving off a few seconds per mile barely changes your arrival time, but your risk skyrockets. You cram in one more email before leaving, thinking it won't matter. You click one more notification, one more video, one more task, telling yourself it's quick, and then you're rushing, you're anxious, you're apologizing for being late again, wondering why time always seems to slip through your fingers. This illusion is rooted in flawed intuition. Our brains aren't wired to understand non-linear time. Driving 60 instead of 30 saves a lot more time than going 80 instead of 60, but it feels the opposite. We believe squeezing more into the margins is efficient, when in reality, it fragments our focus and sabotages our flow. Time-saving bias makes us feel productive when we're actually just scrambling. It makes us impatient with tasks that need care and reckless in moments that demand calm. It doesn't just cost us minutes, it steals our presence, our peace, and our ability to pause, because in chasing time, we lose touch with what we're even saving it for. Well-traveled road effect. The well-traveled road effect is a subtle yet powerful illusion that warps your sense of time, risk, and familiarity. It's the belief that familiar routes, patterns, or routines are faster, safer, or more efficient, simply because they're known. Your brain mistakes repetition for reality, comfort for accuracy, and what feels efficient often isn't. It just feels better because it's the path you've walked before. You take the same road to work every day and swear it's quicker, even when GPS says otherwise. You stick with a process you've always used, even when it's outdated, because it feels reliable. You trust a person, a product, a habit, not because it's better, but because it's yours. The unfamiliar, that feels slower, riskier, harder to trust, even if it's actually the smarter choice. This illusion is born from how the brain processes attention. When you travel a familiar path, your mind slips into autopilot. You don't have to think. Time seems to vanish. But when you take a new road, literally or metaphorically, you're more alert, more aware, more engaged, and that awareness stretches time, making the unfamiliar seem longer, even if it's objectively shorter. The well-traveled road effect doesn't just affect commutes, it affects lives. It's why people stay in unfulfilling jobs, relationships, routines, why we resist change even when we're miserable. The familiar feels faster, safer, easier, so we keep walking the same path, blind to better ones right beside us. This illusion doesn't just steal your time, it steals your courage, because the unknown might take longer, but it might also take you somewhere you've never dared to go. Continued influence effect. The continued influence effect is the chilling illusion that false information disappears once it's corrected, but it doesn't. It lingers in the mind like a stain, influencing your thoughts, feelings, and decisions long after you've been told the truth. Even when you know better, part of you still believes the lie. You hear a news story, a celebrity caught in scandal, a public figure accused of something vile, a claim about a dangerous product. Days later, the report is retracted, false alarm, misreported, taken out of context. But it's too late. Your opinion has shifted. Your memory has latched on. Even as you say, "I know that wasn't true," a shadow of doubt remains. You hesitate, you feel different, and that feeling sticks. This illusion happens because your brain is wired to make meaning fast. When new information fills in the blanks of confusion, it feels satisfying, complete. So even if that information is wrong, your mind builds a narrative around it. When that story is ripped away, the emotional scaffolding stays behind. The truth may update your facts, but it doesn't always reach your feelings. The continued influence effect fuels conspiracy theories, media manipulation, smear campaigns, and political propaganda. A single lie, strategically placed, can permanently distort public opinion, even when debunked. It's why rumors survive, why apologies fall flat, why reputations don't recover. And the most unsettling part? You think you're immune, you think you corrected the record in your head, but somewhere beneath your awareness, the falsehood is still whispering, guiding your judgment like a ghost that refuses to die. False consensus effect. The false consensus effect is the quietly corrosive illusion that most people think the way you do. It's the belief that your opinions, values, behaviors, and preferences are not just normal, they're common, that the way you see the world is how the world is. And when someone disagrees, it's not just surprising, it feels wrong, even threatening. This illusion offers comfort. It tells you you're not alone, that your beliefs are rational, your choices valid, your views grounded in reason and shared by the silent majority. It gives you the emotional safety of community, even if that community is largely imaginary. And so you go online, speak in echo chambers, surround yourself with voices that mirror your own, not because you're closed-minded, but because the illusion convinces you that you're just seeing reality clearly. But the moment that illusion is shattered by a protest, a vote, a disagreement at dinner, it doesn't feel like diversity of thought. It feels like betrayal, like the world has suddenly lost its mind. And in that moment, empathy dies, curiosity fades, the gap between us and them widens. You assume those who disagree are misinformed, irrational, or extreme, not simply different. The false consensus effect doesn't just distort how we see others, it blinds us to ourselves. It makes us overestimate support, underestimate opposition, and misread entire cultures and communities. It makes us less likely to question our views because we think we already know what everyone else thinks. But what we're really hearing is our own voice bouncing back at us in a hall of mirrors. Outcome bias. Outcome bias is the cruel illusion that the result of a decision determines how good that decision was. If it worked out, it must have been wise. If it failed, it must have been stupid. But life doesn't play by those rules, and judging choices by their outcomes blinds us to the truth about risk, effort, and intent. You take a reckless financial gamble and end up winning big. People praise your boldness, your vision, your genius. But if it had failed, you'd be called foolish, impulsive, irresponsible. The action didn't change, only the outcome did. And yet, the judgment flips entirely. You marry someone despite warning signs, and it works out. So you're brave. If it ends in heartbreak, people say, you should have known. This illusion makes us terrified of failure, not because we fear the pain, but because we fear the judgment. It erases context. It punishes wise decisions that end badly and rewards dumb luck wrapped in success. It infects parenting, leadership, investing, relationships, making us revise history in a way that hides the real lessons. It tells us to measure quality by result, not reasoning. Outcome bias is what lets people admire toxic winners and blame victims for trying. It's what stops us from taking smart risks, from forgiving honest mistakes, from learning the value of process over payoff. Because when we judge only by the ending, we never truly understand the story. And sometimes, the worst decisions wear the disguise of success, while the bravest ones are buried beneath failure. Decoy Effect. The decoy effect is the sneaky illusion that manipulates your choices by introducing a third, less attractive option, a decoy, designed to make one of the other two options seem far more appealing than it really is. It's a trick of comparison, a psychological sleight of hand that shifts your preferences without you even realizing you've been nudged. Imagine you're choosing between two options, a small coffee for $3 and a large one for $5. Seems like a toss-up, but then a third appears, a medium coffee for $4.50. Suddenly, the large for $5 looks like a steal. Bigger size for just 50 cents more, the decision feels easy now. But it wasn't you who changed, it was the context. That medium option was never meant to be chosen. It was bait. This illusion plays on your brain's need for relative judgment. We're terrible at assessing value in isolation. We crave comparison to make decisions feel rational, and marketers know this. Politicians know this. Manipulators know this. They don't just offer choices. They craft the illusion of choice. The decoy is engineered to steer you, quietly, predictably, toward the target choice, the one they want you to pick. The decoy effect isn't limited to products. It affects dating, voting, career decisions. You might choose a partner, a policy, a path, not because it's best, but because the alternative was made to look worse. It's a reminder that most decisions aren't made in a vacuum. They're made in carefully constructed arenas, designed to make one option glow while the others fade. You think you chose freely, but the decoy chose for you. Compromise Effect. The compromise effect is the deceptive illusion that the middle choice is always the safest, smartest, or most reasonable option, simply because it sits between two extremes. It's not logic, it's not preference, it's manipulation, quietly packaged as balance. Imagine you're choosing between three options, a cheap meal, a premium gourmet plate, and one priced right in the middle. You didn't walk in knowing what you wanted, but now the middle one feels right. Not too cheap, not too excessive, just enough. But why? You weren't drawn to it on its own merit. You were nudged. The moment you saw the extreme options flanking it, your brain instinctively leaned toward compromise. The illusion doesn't come from reason. It comes from fear. Fear of choosing wrong. Fear of looking greedy or cheap. Fear of regret. So the middle feels safe, respectable, moderate. Marketers know this. Politicians know this. Manipulators know this. They present extreme options, not to be chosen, but to make one choice seem more appealing by contrast. But the compromise effect doesn't just guide purchases, it warps decisions. You stay in a lukewarm relationship because leaving feels too bold and staying feels too weak. You pick a career path that isn't your passion or your nightmare, just something in the middle, hoping it's good enough. And then you wonder why you feel stuck. This illusion convinces you that compromise equals wisdom, but sometimes the bold choice is the right one. Sometimes the extreme is the truth, and when you choose the middle only to feel safe, not because it's what you truly want, you don't find balance. You find mediocrity disguised as peace. Placebo sleep effect. The placebo sleep effect is a bizarre and powerful illusion in which simply believing you slept well can actually make your mind and body perform as if you did, even if you barely got any rest. The mere perception of good sleep can sharpen your focus, lift your mood, and improve cognitive function. It's not just about rest, it's about what your brain thinks rest means. In one experiment, participants were hooked up to machines and told how well they had slept based on fake data. Those told they had above average sleep, despite no actual difference in quality, performed significantly better on memory and attention tests than those told they slept poorly. The belief changed their brain's chemistry. Fatigue became clarity. Fog lifted into sharpness, all because of a lie. This illusion reveals something astonishing. Your mind doesn't just respond to reality. It responds to your expectations of reality. If you wake up thinking, I feel terrible, your day begins under a cloud. But if you tell yourself, I slept deeply, even when you didn't, your body follows that story. It mimics energy, stability, competence. It fakes confidence so well that it becomes real. The placebo sleep effect exposes how fragile the boundary is between body and belief. It challenges the idea that performance is only physical. It shows that the story you tell yourself upon waking might matter more than the hours you spent asleep. It's a subtle magic, a mind trick that turns exhaustion into power, if only for a little while. You didn't get more rest, but your brain thinks you did, and for that moment, that's all that matters. Law of triviality. The law of triviality, often called the bike shed effect, is the unsettling illusion that we devote more time and energy to small, simple issues than to critical, complex ones, because they're easier to understand, easier to control, and easier to feel smart about. It's the comfort of debating the color of the bike shed while the nuclear reactor goes ignored. Imagine a team in a meeting. The first agenda item is a multi-million-dollar strategic decision full of technical nuances and long-term impact. Silence fills the room. No one wants to sound ignorant, but when it comes to choosing the company coffee machine, suddenly everyone has opinions. Heated debate, endless suggestions, passion. Why? Because everyone understands coffee. No one wants to feel powerless or left out, so they dive deep where it's safe and shallow where it matters most. This illusion masquerades as productivity. It makes you feel engaged, useful, involved, but it's a dangerous detour. It drains mental energy from the decisions that actually shape the future. It slows progress, creates bottlenecks, and fosters false consensus because everyone feels good solving the easy problem while the real threat festers in the background. The bike shed effect isn't just found in boardrooms. It lives in politics, relationships, classrooms, online debates. We obsess over typos in emails instead of the broken communication underneath. We argue over dinner plans while ignoring the distance growing between us. We tinker with what we understand to avoid confronting what we fear. And the terrifying truth, the more important something is, the more likely we are to avoid it, distracted by the comfort of the trivial. Curse of knowledge. The curse of knowledge is the maddening illusion that once you know something, you forget what it's like not to know it. It's the silent barrier that turns communication into confusion, empathy into frustration, and expertise into isolation. You try to explain something simple, but others look lost. You feel irritated, even baffled. Why don't they get it? The truth? Because you've forgotten what it's like to be them. This illusion seeps into every conversation, every instruction, every lesson. Teachers struggle to teach beginners because they can no longer remember how foreign the subject once felt. Experts overwhelm novices with jargon, unaware that every word sounds like static. Even in relationships, we assume our feelings are obvious, our meaning crystal clear, our instructions foolproof, because we understand them so well. But that understanding creates blindness. The curse of knowledge makes you impatient. You assume others are being slow, careless, or difficult, when really, they're just starting where you once were, but you can't remember that version of yourself. The early doubts, the awkward trial and error, the way you once stumbled through the dark, those memories fade with mastery, and what replaces them isn't wisdom, it's assumption. This illusion isn't just about teaching, it's about connection. It breaks down empathy. It builds walls between the knowledgeable and the learning, the healed and the hurting, the experienced and the new. And unless you consciously step back into the shoes you once wore, unless you force yourself to remember the not knowing, you'll forever talk past people, wondering why no one seems to understand. Ambiguity aversion. Ambiguity aversion is the illusion that known risks are safer than unknown possibilities, even when the unknown could hold something far better. It's the gripping fear of uncertainty, the discomfort of not knowing, the reflex to cling to clarity, even if that clarity comes at a cost. You're offered two bets. One has a 50% chance of winning, the other is undefined. You don't know the odds. Most people choose the 50%, not because it's better, but because it's known. That's ambiguity aversion in action. The brain doesn't just crave safety, it craves certainty, and it will often trade potential joy, opportunity, or profit to avoid the ache of ambiguity. This illusion keeps people in unfulfilling jobs, toxic relationships, and routines that numb the soul. You know what to expect, even if it hurts. You know how to navigate it, even if it drains you. The unknown? That's terrifying. What if it's worse? What if you regret leaving? What if you never find better? But ambiguity isn't inherently dangerous. It's open, it's potential, it's the space where freedom lives, yet your brain is wired to treat that space as a threat, to see uncertainty as failure waiting to happen. So you play it safe. You pick the devil you know. You stay. Ambiguity aversion doesn't just shape decisions. It suffocates dreams. It keeps the curious silent, the brave cautious, the restless trapped. And in protecting you from imagined risks, it robs you of real growth. Because sometimes the greatest danger isn't what's uncertain, it's what you've convinced yourself you have to live with. Observer Expectancy Effect. The observer expectancy effect is the haunting illusion that your beliefs, even unspoken, can alter the outcome of events, especially when people know you're watching. It's the invisible pressure of expectation bleeding into performance, where your assumptions quietly shape someone else's reality. And the scariest part? It often happens without a single word. Picture a teacher who believes a student is gifted. They smile more, offer encouragement, ask deeper questions. The student, sensing approval, rises to meet it. Now picture another student labeled as difficult. The teacher becomes cold, dismissive, less patient. That student shrinks, withdraws, begins to believe it. Nothing was said out loud, but everything changed, not because of the student's ability, but because of the observer's belief. This illusion is especially dangerous in positions of authority: parents, doctors, coaches, leaders. A scientist who subconsciously expects a result may unknowingly record data in a biased way, skewing the experiment. A doctor who thinks a patient won't recover may be less aggressive in treatment. A parent who assumes their child is bad may respond more harshly, even when the behavior is the same. Expectations become a script that others unconsciously follow. The observer expectancy effect reveals the power of silent influence. It shows that we're not just observers, we're participants, shaping outcomes with nothing more than belief. It's a form of unintentional manipulation where our thoughts become invisible hands, steering others without their awareness. And the cruel irony? We often believe we're being neutral, fair, objective, but what we believe deep down is already being heard, not with ears, with eyes, with body language, with tone, and it changes everything. Sunk cost fallacy. The sunk cost fallacy is the brutal illusion that you must keep going, keep investing, keep enduring, keep sacrificing because of everything you've already put in. Time, money, love, years. It whispers, you've come this far, don't waste it now. And so, you keep walking deeper into the fire, not because it's right, but because you're afraid to admit it was wrong. You stay in a relationship long past its breaking point, haunted by the memories you built together. You continue a failing project because of the sleepless nights and empty bank accounts. You keep pushing through a career that drains you because quitting now would mean admitting you chose wrong. It's not logic that drives you, it's fear. Fear that walking away means it was all for nothing. But here's the truth that hurts the most. It already was. The cost is gone, spent, unrecoverable. The hours won't return. The money is gone. The emotional weight you carried wasn't a down payment on a better ending. It was a toll. And the longer you cling to what's lost, the more you lose what's left. This fallacy seduces you with pride. You think persistence equals strength, that quitting is weakness. But sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop, let go, walk away, not because it wasn't real, but because it no longer is. The sunk cost fallacy doesn't just rob your future, it weaponizes your past. It chains you to bad decisions with the rusted locks of guilt and investment. And unless you see through the illusion, you'll keep paying for something that's already cost you enough. Planning fallacy. The planning fallacy is the cruel illusion that you can get more done in less time than you actually can. It whispers, this time will be different. You set the deadline, make the to-do list, feel the surge of optimism, and once again, you underestimate how long it will all take. Every single time. It's not laziness. It's not stupidity. It's a cognitive lie your brain tells you because it desperately wants the future to be clean, efficient, and under control. You imagine writing that paper in 2 hours, finishing that project by Friday, cleaning the entire apartment before guests arrive. But you forget the interruptions, the fatigue, the hidden complexity, the emotional drag of just being human. And even when you've done the same task before and know how long it really takes, your brain edits the memory, paints a rosier version, and convinces you it'll go faster this time. It never does. The planning fallacy is fueled by hope and distorted by ego. We want to believe we're in control of time, that we're better than our past selves, that we're capable of moving smoothly through chaos. But time doesn't care about your confidence. Life doesn't adjust to your calendar. This illusion doesn't just make you late, it makes you feel like a failure, like you're always behind, always scrambling, always disappointing someone, including yourself. And the most vicious part, you keep falling for it, because every time you plan, you want to believe. You crave the illusion, because reality, messy, unpredictable, exhausting, is so much harder to face. Belief bias. Belief bias is the chilling illusion that something must be logically true simply because it feels true. It's the invisible hand that twists your reasoning to protect your existing beliefs. When an argument aligns with what you already believe, your brain nods along, even if the logic is broken. But when it challenges you, even flawless reasoning feels wrong. You read an argument, all things that breathe are alive. Stones don't breathe. Therefore, stones aren't alive. Easy to accept. But then you hear, all addictive things are unhealthy. Smartphones are addictive. Therefore, smartphones are unhealthy. You believe it, not because the logic is sound, but because the conclusion fits what you already think. Flip it. Smartphones are healthy. And suddenly, the exact same logic feels flawed. You're not judging the argument, you're judging the outcome. Belief bias doesn't just cloud thinking, it protects ego. When logic threatens your identity, your values, your tribe, it becomes the enemy. You defend flawed beliefs with perfect confidence. You twist arguments, reject evidence, and elevate anecdotes, not because you're dishonest, but because your brain is trying to protect your sense of self. It doesn't want truth. It wants consistency. This illusion is what fuels polarization, fake news, and ideological blindness. It makes you feel rational while you drown in confirmation. It convinces you that thinking critically means finding reasons to dismiss what you don't want to believe. Belief bias doesn't just distort how you think, it reshapes what you allow yourself to think. And until you question the comfort of your own beliefs, reason will never truly belong to you. Endowment Effect. The endowment effect is the powerful illusion that something becomes more valuable simply because you own it. The moment you take possession of an object, an idea, a relationship, it becomes part of your identity. And once it's part of you, letting go feels like loss, even if it makes no logical sense to hold on. You buy a mug for $5, but once it's yours, you wouldn't sell it for less than $10. Not because it changed, but because you did. It's no longer just a mug, it's your mug. The act of ownership warps your perception of value, turning the ordinary into the cherished, and this distortion runs deep. It affects how we price our belongings, defend our beliefs, and cling to things that no longer serve us. You hold on to old clothes you never wear, projects you've outgrown, or relationships that drain you, not because they're good, but because they're yours. You defend a decision not because it's right, but because you made it. The endowment effect doesn't care about logic. It cares about identity. It tricks you into believing that parting with something is giving up part of yourself. Marketers exploit this illusion when they let you test drive, try it at home, or customize a product. The moment it feels like yours, you value it more. And even if you don't need it, you'll fight to keep it, not because it's worth it, but because losing it would feel like losing a piece of you. That's the cruel beauty of the endowment effect. It doesn't change the thing. It changes you. Hedonic Treadmill. The hedonic treadmill is the crushing illusion that happiness is just one more achievement, purchase, or milestone away, only to find that when you get there, the feeling fades and the chase begins again. It's the endless loop where joy becomes a moving target, always just out of reach no matter how fast you run. You think, if I get that promotion, I'll finally feel fulfilled. You get it. You're proud for a moment, then you're eyeing the next step. You think, once I find the right person, I'll feel whole. You do. You're in love. But slowly, routine sets in. The mind adapts, adjusts, craves more. That new car, new house, new body, it glows, then dulls, and you're back to feeling like something's missing. This illusion is rooted in adaptation. Our brains are wired to normalize whatever we experience: pain, joy, wealth, beauty. What once thrilled you becomes your new baseline. What once seemed impossible becomes expected. And so the treadmill spins. You run faster, you work harder, you consume more, but the scenery never really changes. The hedonic treadmill is more than just disappointment. It's emotional exhaustion. It's the soul-deep emptiness of always striving and never arriving. It turns gratitude into forgetfulness. It robs you of presence. And worst of all, it convinces you that happiness lives in the next thing, never in this one. You don't stop running because you're tired. You stop running when you realize the finish line was never real. And the moment you step off the treadmill, you might finally feel the stillness you've been chasing all along. Zeigarnik Effect. The Zeigarnik Effect is the restless, gnawing illusion that unfinished tasks take up more mental space than completed ones. It's why a conversation left hanging keeps echoing in your head, why that email you didn't send, the project you didn't finish, the apology you never gave, all stay loud, urgent, alive in your mind, long after everything else fades. It's your brain's refusal to rest until the loop is closed. When a task is completed, the mind releases it. But when it's interrupted or left incomplete, it lingers like an itch beneath the surface. It tugs at your focus, spikes your anxiety, and sabotages your peace. It doesn't matter how small the task is, a half-written sentence, an unanswered text, a decision you keep delaying. Your mind locks it in as unfinished business, and it won't let go. The Zeigarnik Effect evolved to help us survive. In the wild, forgetting to finish something could mean danger, a trap not set, food not stored, a wound not tended. So the brain learned to keep unfinished tasks on high alert. But in the modern world, where the to-do list never ends and everything is always in progress, this once helpful function becomes torment. It keeps you up at night. It fractures your focus. It chains your energy to tasks you haven't even touched. You don't just remember what's undone, you feel it, the emotional weight, the psychological friction, and no matter how many other things you accomplish, it's the one open tab in your mental browser that drains everything else. The mind craves closure, and until it gets it, it won't let you forget. Recency Illusion. The recency illusion is the unnerving belief that something you've just noticed is new or suddenly everywhere, when in reality, it's been there all along. Your brain, now aware of it, starts spotting it everywhere, as if the world changed overnight. But it didn't. You did. You hear an unfamiliar word. Suddenly, it pops up in every conversation, article, and podcast. You learn about a social trend, and now it feels like everyone's doing it. You notice a type of car, and now it's on every street. It feels like a phenomenon, a sudden explosion, but it's not. It's your attention, freshly tuned, obsessively scanning for the thing it just woke up to. This illusion is born from selective attention and cognitive bias. Your brain filters the world constantly, discarding most of what it sees. But once something crosses the threshold into awareness, the filter opens, and the more you notice it, the more convinced you become that it's new. You say, "Why is everyone talking about this now?" When the truth is, they've always been. You just weren't listening. Recency illusion fuels panic, paranoia, and outrage. It makes language feel like it's degrading when slang evolves. It makes societal changes seem abrupt and threatening. It makes trends feel like invasions. But often, the only thing that's changed is your gaze. This illusion doesn't just distort your perception. It rewrites your sense of time, of history, of progress. It makes you feel like the world is shifting faster than it actually is. And in that feeling, you lose your grip on what's real and what's simply new to you. Default effect. The default effect is the quiet illusion that the easiest choice, the one already selected, already arranged, already set, is the right one. It's the power of inertia masquerading as decision-making. You think you chose it. You think it reflects your values. But in reality, you accepted it because changing it felt like friction. You sign up for a service and don't uncheck the box to receive marketing emails. So you get them. You leave your phone on factory settings, not because they're perfect, but because they were already there. You let your retirement fund, your medical preferences, your privacy settings, even your digital identity be dictated by whatever was on by default. And you don't question it, not because you agree, but because changing it feels like effort. The default effect thrives on your exhaustion, on your fear of doing it wrong, on your desire to move forward without thinking too hard. And the world, marketers, tech companies, institutions, knows this. They weaponize it. They build systems where the path of least resistance is the one that benefits them, not you. They understand that most people won't opt out, question, or reconfigure. They'll just go with the flow and call it a decision. This illusion is dangerous because it feels harmless. You didn't choose that belief, that subscription, that option. It was just there. But every default is a choice someone else made for you. And the moment you stop noticing that, you stop living intentionally. The default effect doesn't just shape your behavior, it quietly becomes your life. Anchoring bias. Anchoring bias is the mental illusion that the first piece of information you receive, no matter how random, irrelevant, or absurd, silently locks itself into your mind and drags every judgment, decision, and expectation toward it. It becomes the invisible anchor that distorts your thinking, even when you believe you're being objective. You walk into a store and see a jacket priced at $500. It's too expensive, obviously. Then you see another one for $200 and suddenly think, that's a great deal. But is it? Or did your brain just use the $500 price tag as the anchor to make $200 feel cheap? You're not evaluating the value of the second item on its own merit. You're comparing it to whatever came first. Anchoring doesn't just affect shopping, it infects every part of life. A salary offer feels generous if it's higher than what you expected, even if it's objectively unfair. A guess in trivia feels reasonable if it's near the first number thrown out. Even in courtrooms, the first suggested sentence can shape how harsh or lenient the final verdict feels. This illusion works because the brain craves reference points. It doesn't like uncertainty, so it latches onto the first figure, idea, or impression it can grab, then builds the rest of its logic around that starting point. Even when it's wrong, the anchor becomes truth, and truth becomes warped. Anchoring bias doesn't just nudge you, it silently owns you. It tricks you into thinking you're making independent decisions while your mind is still tethered to a weight you didn't choose and probably didn't even notice. Framing effect. The framing effect is the invisible illusion that the way information is presented, not the facts themselves, shapes how we feel, decide, and believe. It's not what you're told, it's how you're told, and in that subtle difference, entire realities shift. A doctor says, "This surgery has a 90% survival rate." You feel hopeful, safe. But if they say, "There's a 10% chance you'll die," you feel dread, even though both are mathematically identical. A politician says a program will create 10,000 jobs and earns applause. Another says the same program will cost taxpayers $50 million and outrage explodes. The truth never changed, only the frame around it did. This illusion doesn't just bend facts, it bends you. It hijacks your emotions. It tints your judgment. It makes you support one thing and reject another, even if they're functionally the same. It doesn't matter how smart or rational you think you are. Your brain is wired to react more to the story than the substance. Marketers know it. Leaders know it. Manipulators thrive on it. They don't need to change your values. They just need to reframe the question. Would you like to protect your family? Feels heroic. Would you like to spend more on insurance? Feels burdensome. Same action, different world. The framing effect doesn't just trick you, it makes you complicit in the trick. You believe you're choosing based on truth, but you're reacting to language, tone, emphasis, and until you learn to step outside the frame, your choices will never fully be your own. Conjunction fallacy. The conjunction fallacy is the dangerous illusion that a specific, detailed scenario is more likely than a broad, general one, simply because it feels more realistic. Your brain loves stories. It craves detail, context, narrative, but that craving leads you to believe that more information equals more truth, when in reality, it often equals more deception. You're told about Linda. She's 31, single, outspoken, and deeply concerned with social justice, which is more likely, Linda is a bank teller, or Linda is a bank teller and active in the feminist movement. Almost everyone chooses the second. It fits, it feels right, but it's statistically impossible. The probability of two events happening together is always less than or equal to the probability of just one of those events happening. Adding detail makes the story richer, but the likelihood smaller. Still, your intuition insists the opposite. This fallacy doesn't just trip us up in logic puzzles. It shapes how we judge people, risks, and even truth itself. We're more likely to believe a conspiracy theory when it's packed with vivid, dramatic detail, even if a simpler explanation makes far more sense. We trust personal stories over plain statistics. We believe that someone who seems angry and secretive must also be guilty of something darker. The conjunction fallacy is subtle but relentless. It makes you mistake coherence for truth. It seduces you into believing that the most compelling version of a story must be the most accurate one. But sometimes the truth is boring, and your brain, in its hunger for meaning, will trade probability for poetry without even asking your permission. Appeal to novelty bias. Appeal to novelty bias is the illusion that something is better simply because it's new. It's the belief that newer means smarter, faster, more advanced, more relevant, that what came before is outdated, boring, obsolete. This bias doesn't just affect what we buy, it rewires how we think, what we value, and how we judge truth. You see a new diet, a new app, a new leadership method, and it immediately feels superior to the old one. Not because you've tested it, not because it's proven, but because it's fresh. It has momentum, it has buzz. Your brain, addicted to progress and stimulation, leans forward. We're wired to chase the next thing because in evolution, new often meant survival. But in modern life, that instinct gets hijacked. Appeal to novelty fuels consumerism. You buy the latest phone, not because your old one is broken, but because the new one exists. You take advice from someone younger because their ideas sound trendier. You dismiss traditions, philosophies, or systems that have stood the test of time just because they aren't trending. But the newest isn't always the best, and the oldest isn't always obsolete. Novelty can be a mask for emptiness, a shortcut to relevance without substance. And this bias makes you vulnerable to manipulation, to marketing, to forgetting what already works. The appeal to novelty doesn't just shift your focus, it clouds your judgment. It makes you chase change for the sake of change, and in doing so, convinces you to abandon wisdom that wasn't broken just because something shinier came along. Negativity dominance. Negativity dominance is the dark illusion that bad is stronger than good, not just louder, but heavier, stickier, more contagious. It's the emotional gravity that pulls us toward pain, fear, and anger more forcefully than joy or peace ever could. One insult can erase 10 compliments. One failure can eclipse a dozen wins. One betrayal can taint an entire relationship. And the worst part? Your brain is wired to let it happen. You remember the one time your parent disappointed you more vividly than the 100 times they showed up. You fixate on the single critical comment in a sea of praise. You relive your worst mistakes, play them on loop, let them define you, while your successes flicker and fade. This isn't just memory, it's survival. Evolution favored those who paid more attention to threats. Our ancestors needed to overreact to danger to stay alive. But in a modern world, that bias becomes poison. Negativity doesn't just dominate your thoughts, it hijacks your relationships. A single fight can feel more defining than years of loyalty. One harsh look, one sharp word, and suddenly trust begins to rot. Even in society, fear and outrage spread faster than hope. Bad news gets more clicks, scandals get more airtime, anger gets more votes. This illusion makes happiness feel fragile and fleeting, while pain feels permanent and true. It convinces you that dark moments matter more than bright ones, that suffering is more real than joy. But that's not truth, that's wiring, and unless you recognize this dominance, you'll carry more weight than life is actually giving you. You'll bleed from wounds that should have already healed. Misinformation Effect. The misinformation effect is the terrifying illusion that your memories are solid, sacred, and unchangeable, when in truth, they are fragile, corruptible, and dangerously easy to rewrite. It reveals that every time you recall a memory, you don't just revisit it, you rebuild it. And when false information slips into that process, your memory becomes fiction without you ever realizing it. Imagine witnessing a car crash. Later, someone asks, "Did you see the broken glass when the car smashed into the pole?" You didn't. But now, that word, smashed, plants something. Days later, you swear you saw shattered glass. You swear it was violent. You swear you remember. But you're remembering someone else's suggestion, not the event itself. This illusion is haunting because it affects everyone. Eyewitnesses testify with confidence about things that never happened. Victims remember imagined details. Friends recall entire conversations that never occurred. And because it feels real, we defend these false memories as truth, doubling down even when faced with evidence. The misinformation effect doesn't just distort the past, it rewrites identities. A twisted memory of how a relationship ended can define your view of love. A reinterpreted childhood moment can shift your beliefs about who you are. And it only takes one careless comment, one suggestion, one manipulated headline to alter your recollection forever. This illusion shatters the idea that memory is a camera. It's not. It's a story, and stories are edited. The danger isn't just forgetting, it's believing with your whole heart in something that never truly happened and letting that belief shape your present. Affect heuristic. The affect heuristic is the quiet illusion that your feelings are facts, that if something feels good, it must be safe, true, or right. And if it feels bad, it must be dangerous, false, or wrong. It's your emotions hijacking your judgment, whispering, "Trust me," while your rational mind sits silently in the back seat. You hear a politician speak with confidence and charisma. You like their tone, their smile, the rhythm of their voice, and suddenly, everything they say feels reasonable. You hear a warning delivered with fear or panic, and you instantly reject it, not because of the facts, but because it feels uncomfortable. Your brain equates pleasure with truth, discomfort with error. This illusion bypasses logic entirely. It's why we're drawn to attractive people and persuasive speakers, why we judge products by packaging, trust ideas that make us feel good, and dismiss warnings that cause anxiety. If a new policy makes you feel hopeful, you support it, even if the data says otherwise. If a risk evokes dread, you avoid it, even if the odds are low. The affect heuristic doesn't just distort decisions, it defines them. It's why we buy on impulse, fall in love too fast, fear the wrong threats, and ignore the right ones. Your brain doesn't say, "Let's think this through." It says, "How do I feel about this?" And then it builds the logic around that emotion. This illusion makes us human and dangerously predictable, because when emotion becomes the compass, truth becomes relative, and without realizing it, we stop thinking and start feeling our way through reality, one misjudged emotion at a time. IKEA Effect. The IKEA Effect is the seductive illusion that something is more valuable simply because you built it, even if it's flawed, imperfect, or objectively worse than alternatives. It's the emotional high of labor turning into love. The more effort you invest, the more meaning you attach. The more time you give, the more worth it seems to have. You don't just see a product, you see yourself in it. You struggle for hours assembling a crooked bookshelf. You curse, sweat, nearly give up, then stand back and admire it like it's a masterpiece. Someone points out the wobble, the uneven shelves, the leftover screws, and you defend it like it's sacred, not because it's excellent, but because you made it. The process became the price of attachment. This illusion doesn't just live in furniture, it lives in projects, businesses, relationships. You hold on to a startup that isn't working because you built it from scratch. You stay in a relationship that's falling apart because of all the effort you've poured into fixing it. You defend an idea, not because it's right, but because it's yours. You can't tell the difference between value and emotional investment because your identity is tangled in the creation. The IKEA effect makes you overestimate your contributions and underestimate flaws. It makes you blind to better options. It convinces you that effort equals excellence. And in doing so, it traps you in a love affair with your own labor, even when what you built is breaking you. Because walking away doesn't just feel like giving up on a thing. It feels like giving up on you. Social comparison bias. Social comparison bias is the bitter illusion that another person's success somehow threatens your own. It's the reflexive discomfort, the subtle tightening in your chest, the quiet resistance you feel when someone else shines too brightly. Deep down, it's the belief that if they rise, you fall, that success is a limited resource and someone else's gain is your personal loss. You meet a coworker who's smarter, faster, more charismatic. You smile, but something twists inside you. You downplay their skills, question their credentials, silently hope they slip up because their excellence reflects your insecurity. You see a friend chasing a dream you buried. They're not hurting you, but their boldness feels like a mirror you don't want to look into. It stings, not because they're doing wrong, but because they're doing what you didn't. This illusion isn't just jealousy, it's threat. Your brain sees others like you, same age, same background, same job, and instinctively compares. And if they seem to pull ahead, your identity starts to tremble. What does this say about me? It whispers. Am I falling behind? The reaction isn't malicious, it's defensive. You feel compelled to protect your sense of self, even if it means quietly rooting against those around you. Social comparison bias can sabotage relationships, team dynamics, and personal growth. It makes us undermine others to soothe our ego. It stops us from learning from the people who inspire us because we're too busy resenting them. But in the grip of this illusion, we don't just compete with others. We alienate ourselves from the very people who might lift us higher if we let them. Pseudo-diagnosticity. Pseudo-diagnosticity is the illusion that certain information is helping you make a better decision, when in fact, it's irrelevant, distracting, or even misleading. It tricks your brain into believing it's being analytical, thoughtful, precise, when really it's chasing the wrong data while ignoring what actually matters. You're told that 80% of people with a disease test positive on a certain screening. That sounds useful, right? So you think if someone tests positive, they probably have the disease. But wait, what about people without the disease? How many of them also test positive? You don't ask because your brain locks onto the first piece of diagnostic information and assumes it's the whole picture. This illusion lives everywhere. In job interviews, you focus on a candidate's degree instead of their actual performance. In dating, you fixate on shared hobbies instead of emotional availability. In business, you cling to past successes and ignore shifting market conditions. You mistake familiar, easy-to-understand data for relevant insight because it makes you feel in control. Pseudo-diagnosticity is seductive because it offers the illusion of clarity. It tells you you're making a smart choice even as you filter out the information that could actually change your mind. It creates a false sense of confidence and blinds you to alternatives that don't fit the frame you've already locked onto. And the danger is subtle. You're not making bad decisions because you don't have enough data. You're making bad decisions because you're listening to the wrong data while convincing yourself that you're being perfectly rational. Hyperbolic discounting. Hyperbolic discounting is the devastating illusion that what you want right now is worth far more than what you could have later. It's the brain's impulsive shortcut that trades long-term peace for short-term pleasure. And it doesn't whisper, it screams. The donut today over the health tomorrow, the binge now over the clarity later, the cheap thrill now over the deep joy down the road. You know you should save money, but there's a sale today. You know you should study, but scrolling feels better now. You promise yourself you'll make up for it later, and in the moment, that logic feels solid, but later never feels like now, and the cycle repeats. Hyperbolic discounting doesn't just favor immediate rewards, it craves them, exaggerates their value, and buries the cost. Your future self, to your brain, they're a stranger, a ghost, someone who will deal with the consequences while you enjoy the reward. So you push off discomfort, you postpone sacrifice, you delay change, and you become trapped in a loop where tomorrow always holds your better self, and today always gets your indulgence. This illusion is why we stay addicted, stay broke, stay stuck, why we chase quick wins and ignore slow transformations. It's not because we're weak, it's because our brains were built for survival, not patience. But in a world where growth demands delay, this instinct betrays us. Hyperbolic discounting doesn't just sabotage goals, it erodes trust in ourselves. Every time we break a promise to our future self, we weaken that bond, until one day we no longer believe we'll ever change at all. Clustering illusion. The clustering illusion is the seductive belief that patterns exist in random noise, that coincidences have meaning, that streaks signify intention, and that the universe is leaving clues just for you. It's your brain desperately trying to impose order on chaos, finding faces in clouds, messages in stars, and purpose in events that are nothing more than statistical flukes. You flip a coin and it lands on heads 5 times in a row. You feel tension rising, like the next one must be tails, or that you're on some kind of lucky streak. You see a series of similar numbers on a lottery ticket and feel drawn to it, as if the pattern signals fate. But randomness isn't evenly spaced. It clumps, it clusters, it creates the illusion of structure where there is none. This illusion doesn't just appear in games of chance. It shapes your memories, your fears, your superstitions. You hear about 3 plane crashes in 1 week and panic, convinced air travel is suddenly more dangerous. You notice bad things happen in 3s and brace yourself for the next disaster. You experience a series of personal misfortunes and begin to feel cursed, as if the universe is watching and waiting. The clustering illusion feeds conspiracy theories, magical thinking, and paranoia. It makes you draw connections between unrelated events and miss the real story, because your brain hates randomness. It wants meaning, even if it has to invent it. And the terrifying truth? Once you believe the pattern is real, you start seeing it everywhere, not because it's there, but because you've already decided it is. Omission bias. Omission bias is the haunting illusion that not acting, doing nothing, is somehow safer, more moral, or less blameworthy than taking action, even when the consequences are the same or worse. It's the quiet belief that harm caused by what we do is worse than harm caused by what we allow, and that belief shapes decisions in ways that can be as cowardly as they are catastrophic. You see someone being bullied and say nothing. You didn't cause the harm, right? But your silence helped it happen. You don't speak up about a flawed decision at work because you don't want to be responsible for what follows. So instead, something worse unfolds. You don't pull the trigger, but you let the timer run out, and you walk away believing you did the right thing when what you really did was nothing. This illusion comforts the conscience. It says, you didn't choose this, you just let it happen. It lets us avoid accountability behind the veil of inaction, but in reality, omission is action. Looking away is a choice. Saying nothing is a decision, and the damage it causes can echo just as deeply, if not more, because no one takes responsibility for it. Omission bias distorts ethics, warps justice, and paralyzes courage. It makes us passive when life demands boldness. It makes us complicit in systems we claim to hate. It convinces us that doing nothing is morally neutral, when in truth, silence and stillness are sometimes the loudest, most powerful forms of harm. And the worst part? You can live your whole life thinking you're innocent, when all you really were was absent. Apophenia. Apophenia is the haunting illusion that there's meaning hidden in everything, that coincidences are signs, patterns are messages, And randomness is never truly random. It's the mind's compulsion to connect dots, to create stories from chaos, to find purpose in the meaningless. And once it starts, it doesn't stop. You see a license plate with your birthday in it and feel the universe is nudging you. A song plays right after you think of someone, and you wonder if they're thinking of you too. A series of numbers repeats, and suddenly you're searching for spiritual significance. But the truth is, the world is full of noise. The patterns aren't real. You're creating them because your brain is hardwired to seek order, even when none exists. This illusion was once a survival mechanism. Our ancestors couldn't afford to miss signs. A rustle in the bushes might mean a predator. Better to assume intention than risk death. But in today's world, this instinct turns against us. It feeds superstition, magical thinking, and dangerous delusions. It's how gamblers chase lucky streaks. It's how conspiracy theories are born. It's how mental illness, like schizophrenia, can manifest. Seeing messages, codes, and connections in places where none exist. Apophenia doesn't just twist perception, it rewrites reality. Once you believe the universe is speaking to you, everything becomes a message. Every coincidence becomes fate. Every shadow hides intention. You stop seeing the world as it is and begin seeing only what you believe it's trying to say. It's not the world that becomes dangerous. It's how sure you are that it's speaking just to you. Confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the seductive illusion that what you believe is true because you keep finding evidence that it is. But you're not discovering truth. You're filtering reality through a lens that only lets in what agrees with you. Everything else? It gets twisted, ignored, or flat out rejected. You believe someone doesn't like you, so you notice every glance, every silence, every missed text as proof. You think a politician is corrupt, so you seek out articles, videos, and posts that confirm it, while dismissing anything that contradicts your view as biased, fake, or irrelevant. You aren't investigating, you're reinforcing. You're building a fortress of validation to protect what you already want to believe. This illusion doesn't just affect what you see, it affects what you look for. You don't search for truth, you search for agreement. You unconsciously phrase questions to get the answers you expect. You remember facts that support your case and forget the rest. You align with people who echo your worldview and tune out those who challenge it, not because they're wrong, but because they make you uncomfortable. Confirmation bias feels empowering, but it's a trap. It fuels polarization. It keeps you locked in echo chambers. It kills curiosity. You can't grow when you're always right. You can't understand when you refuse to be wrong. And slowly, the world you see becomes a mirror, not a window. The most dangerous thing about confirmation bias is that it doesn't feel like bias. It feels like clarity, like certainty, like truth. But sometimes, what feels like truth is just your reflection, nodding back. Congruence bias. Congruence bias is the blinding illusion that to test if something is true, we should only look for evidence that confirms it, while ignoring the power of trying to disprove it. It's a mental trap disguised as logic, one that keeps us locked inside our own assumptions, chasing answers that only echo what we already believe. Imagine you think your friend is upset because they're mad at you, so you only ask questions that would confirm it. Did I do something wrong? Are you angry with me? You don't consider they might be tired, grieving, distracted, because your mind is searching in only one direction. You're testing a theory not by challenging it, but by feeding it. This illusion is dangerous because it feels scientific. It feels like critical thinking, but it's not. It's tunnel vision. Instead of asking, what would this look like if I were wrong? You ask, how can I prove I'm right? Congruence bias isn't about discovering truth. It's about protecting certainty. It infects relationships, politics, medicine, business. Everywhere we form a hypothesis. You believe someone is untrustworthy, so you only notice the moments that support it. You're sure your plan is solid, so you ignore warning signs. You don't ask what would falsify your belief. You only hunt for what sustains it. And the scariest part? You think you're being rational. You think you're being thorough. But in truth, you're building a cage of confirmation, tightening the bars with every answer that tells you what you already wanted to hear, until one day you mistake the echo for evidence and call it truth. In-group bias. In-group bias is the deeply ingrained illusion that our group, our people, our team, our community is better, more trustworthy, more deserving than them. It's the instinct to favor those who look, think, live, or believe like us, not because they've earned it, but simply because they belong to us. And it shapes our morals, our empathy, and our sense of justice in ways we rarely notice. You excuse your friend's cruelty as a bad day, but judge a stranger's mistake as a character flaw. You give your political party the benefit of the doubt, but assume the worst about the other side. You celebrate the success of someone from your culture, but feel envy or even suspicion when someone from another succeeds. These aren't conscious choices, they're emotional defaults. This illusion doesn't just build loyalty, it builds division. It blinds you to the harm your group causes, justifies your side's missteps, and exaggerates the faults of outsiders. It creates echo chambers where criticism feels like betrayal and where questioning your own group feels dangerous. It tells you, we are good, they are not. In-group bias is why wars are fought, why prejudice persists, why justice bends. It makes empathy selective, fairness conditional, and truth negotiable. It's not always hateful. It often feels like pride. But behind that pride is a wall that keeps you from seeing the full humanity in others. And the most terrifying part? Everyone's someone else's them. So as long as you cling to this illusion, you risk becoming blind to your own biases while defending them in the name of belonging. Outgroup homogeneity effect. The outgroup homogeneity effect is the illusion that they are all the same, while we are unique, complex, and diverse. It's the subtle but powerful mental shortcut that paints people outside your group with one broad, flattened brushstroke. They think alike, they act alike, they believe the same things. But when it comes to your group, every individual is distinct, every perspective matters, every story is different. You hear about a crime committed by someone from another race, religion, or political party, and suddenly it feels like those people are dangerous. But when someone from your group messes up, you say, they don't represent all of us. That's the illusion. You extend humanity to your own, but strip it away from the other. This bias fuels stereotypes, racism, political division, and even war. It makes you see strangers as categories instead of people. It turns human beings into symbols. You meet one rude person from another culture, and it becomes a narrative. They're all like that. But the truth is, you're not seeing them. You're seeing your fear, your bias, your need for simplicity. The outgroup homogeneity effect isn't just about hate. It's about laziness. Your brain wants shortcuts. It wants to predict behavior fast. So instead of listening, it assumes. Instead of connecting, it categorizes. And with each assumption, you get farther from the truth. This illusion doesn't just dehumanize others. It limits you. It blinds you to nuance, to empathy, to potential friendships you'll never have. Because the moment you stop seeing individuals, you stop seeing people. And when that happens, anything becomes justifiable, even cruelty. Halo effect. The halo effect is the enchanting illusion that one positive trait, beauty, charm, intelligence, confidence, means everything else about a person must be equally good. It's the mental shortcut that lets a single glow blind us to flaws, red flags, or even danger. And it's why we fall so easily for people who look like heroes, even when they act like villains. You meet someone who's attractive, and suddenly they seem kinder, smarter, more trustworthy. You hear a speaker with charisma, and you assume their message is true. You see a successful person and you believe they must also be wise, moral, and good-hearted. You don't question their actions, you just trust your impression, because when someone shines in one area, your brain bathes everything else in that same light. But that light is deceiving. The halo effect smooths over contradictions. It makes it harder to see manipulation, incompetence, even cruelty, because your brain is painting over the details with a broad stroke of admiration. It's why charming leaders get away with lies, why celebrities are idolized despite abuse, why toxic relationships begin with chemistry and end in ruin. The halo effect doesn't just affect how we see others, it affects how we treat them. We give attractive people more chances, listen to confident voices more closely, assume success equals character, and we don't even realize we're doing it. This illusion doesn't just distort perception, it rewires judgment. It makes you mistake magnetism for meaning and presence for virtue. And the worst part? It doesn't show up as deception. It shows up as intuition, as a gut feeling you trust, until the mask slips and you realize the glow was just a glare. Horn effect. The horn effect is the harsh illusion that one negative trait in a person taints everything else about them, that a single flaw, failure, or moment of weakness defines the whole. It's the emotional reflex that makes us see someone through a lens of criticism, not because of who they truly are, but because of one detail that we let poison the rest. They were rude once, so now you think they're selfish. They dressed differently, so now you think they're unprofessional. They made one mistake, and suddenly their intelligence, integrity, or worth is in question. The horn effect doesn't just shape what you notice, it rewrites everything you've already seen. Their successes feel like flukes, their kindness feels manipulative, their words feel rehearsed. You start to believe they're bad because you've already decided they're not good. This illusion doesn't come from truth, it comes from fear, bias, ego. Your brain wants coherence. It wants the world to make sense. So when it spots a flaw, it reshapes the whole image to match. And just like that, a three-dimensional person becomes a one-note villain in your mind. The horn effect is destructive in relationships, workplaces, classrooms. It ruins second chances. It silences redemption. It fuels gossip and bullying and keeps people locked in the worst version of themselves, not because they can't grow, but because you've stopped letting them. You think you're being cautious, realistic, even smart, but often you're just seeing a shadow and mistaking it for the whole. And every time you give into this illusion, you don't just shrink someone else, you shrink yourself. Illusory truth effect. The illusory truth effect is the unsettling illusion that repetition turns lies into truth. It's the psychological trick where the more often you hear something, regardless of whether it's true, the more familiar it feels and the more believable it becomes, not because of evidence, not because of logic, but because your brain starts whispering, "I've heard this before, it must be real." You scroll through social media and see a false claim repeated in meme after meme, post after post. At first, you question it, then you shrug, and eventually it feels true, not because it is, but because it's comfortable. Familiarity breeds credibility, and the brain confuses ease of processing with accuracy. If something sounds smooth, simple, and recognizable, it tricks you into thinking it's valid. This illusion is terrifying in its simplicity. It's how propaganda works. It's how rumors become reputations. It's how lies spread faster than truth, because lies are often crafted to be easier to digest, easier to remember, easier to repeat. Facts are messy, lies are polished, and the more they're echoed, the more real they feel. The illusory truth effect doesn't just fool you, it changes you. You begin to internalize misinformation. You repeat it, act on it, defend it, and all the while you feel like you know something, when in fact you're under the spell of repetition. What's most dangerous is that you rarely notice it happening. You think you've learned something, but really you've just heard it enough times that your brain mistook the echo for truth. And once that seed is planted, it's almost impossible to dig out. Recency bias. Recency bias is the illusion that whatever just happened matters more, that the most recent event, feeling, or memory is the most important, most accurate, or most true. It hijacks your perception of time, making the latest feel like the greatest or the worst. It traps you in the now, erasing the broader story with whatever just entered your mind. You finish a bad week and suddenly think your entire year has been a failure. You bomb one presentation and question your whole career. You have one fight and feel like your relationship is doomed, not because it is, but because recency is louder than reason. Your brain fixates on the last thing and lets it define the everything. This illusion fuels emotional whiplash. It makes you chase trends instead of values. It makes you forget how far you've come, how many wins you've collected, how many storms you've already survived, because the latest storm always feels like the worst one. It makes you question love after one hard day and doubt yourself after one stumble. Recency bias shows up in judgment, memory, voting, performance reviews, even self-worth. It makes the last thing someone said matter more than a decade of truth. It makes you forget patterns in favor of moments. And that forgetfulness can cost you relationships, peace, and growth. The illusion isn't just that the present is real. It's that the present is everything. But you are more than your latest mistake. You are bigger than your most recent failure. And if you don't fight this bias, you'll live in a world where the past means nothing and the future never arrives. Serial position effect. The serial position effect is the quiet illusion that we remember the beginning and end of things best and forget the middle. It's why first impressions burn into memory, why finales linger long after the rest has faded, and why the messy middle so often gets lost, ignored, or rewritten. Your brain doesn't record experience evenly. It highlights the edges and leaves the center to blur. You recall the opening of a speech, the powerful hook, the first joke, the initial moment of connection. You remember the final words, the closing applause, the way it made you feel at the end. But the heart of it, the details, the depth, the nuance, gone. Unless something extraordinary happened in the middle, it fades beneath the weight of what came first and what came last. This illusion doesn't just affect memory, it shapes judgment. You judge an entire date by how it started and how it ended. You remember a vacation by the first breathtaking view and the last night's laughter, forgetting the slow hours in between. You assess a person by your first impression and your most recent interaction, overlooking everything that happened in the space between. The serial position effect quietly builds your narratives, your relationships, your regrets. It's why a rocky start can poison something good, and why a strong finish can redeem what came before. And unless you see through the illusion, you'll keep mistaking the highlights for the whole story, never realizing how much was lost in the forgotten middle, where most of life actually happens. Group attribution error. Group attribution error is the illusion that one individual's actions reflect the character of an entire group, or that the decisions of a group reveal the beliefs of every single member. It's the mental shortcut that turns people into labels and labels into judgment. And once it takes hold, it spreads like wildfire, branding innocent people with the guilt of others. Someone from a particular race, religion, or nationality commits a crime, and suddenly all of them are dangerous. One protest turns violent, and the entire movement is condemned. One coworker slacks off, and you decide that department is lazy. You don't see individuals. You see patterns, tribes, enemies. It's not just stereotyping. It's the lie that one speaks for all, and all are to blame for one. This illusion thrives in division. It makes conflict feel justified. It makes dehumanization feel logical. It gives you a false sense of control. If I understand those people, I can protect myself. But you're not protecting yourself. You're distancing yourself from empathy, from truth, from the complexity of real human beings. Group attribution error doesn't just poison your perspective, it poisons society. It feeds racism, sexism, xenophobia, and political hatred. It creates us and them, where there should only be people, each with their own story, their own choices, their own soul. It's easy to make someone part of a group. It's much harder to see them as themselves. But the moment you stop asking who a person really is and start assuming based on where they belong, you're not seeing them at all. You're only seeing your illusion and calling it truth. Survivorship bias. Survivorship bias is the dangerous illusion that we can learn how to succeed by only looking at those who already have, while ignoring the countless others who did the same thing and failed. It's the trap of focusing on the visible winners and forgetting the invisible dead, and it builds a false map of success, drawn only from those who made it out alive. You hear about the entrepreneur who dropped out of college and built $1 billion company, so you think quitting school must be a bold, genius move. You read about the artist who went viral overnight and believe that talent alone is enough. You see the fitness model, the actor, the investor, the prodigy, and think if they did it, I can too. But you never hear about the thousands who tried the same and vanished. This illusion filters the world through a lens of victory. It tells you hard work always pays off, risk always leads to reward, and the right mindset guarantees success. But it doesn't show you the graveyard of dreams, the quiet collapse of those who were just as driven, just as talented, just as deserving, but didn't make it. Not because they lacked something, but because luck, timing, and chaos play bigger roles than we like to admit. Survivorship bias fuels toxic optimism. It makes failure feel like a personal flaw instead of a normal outcome. It blinds you to the brutal reality behind every polished success story. And unless you learn to look at the whole picture, especially the parts no one talks about, you'll keep chasing myths, mistaking survival for strategy and stories for truth. Base rate fallacy. The base rate fallacy is the dangerously deceptive illusion that specific information, especially if it's vivid or dramatic, matters more than cold, statistical truth. It's when your brain ignores the bigger picture to focus on the details right in front of it, even when those details are wildly misleading. Imagine hearing that someone tested positive for a rare disease. You panic, assuming they must be sick, but you forget or never even think to ask how rare the disease actually is. If it affects only 1 in 10,000 people and the test has a 5% false positive rate, the chance that person actually has it is still incredibly low. But your gut doesn't care about probabilities. It cares about immediacy, about fear, about the what if. This illusion doesn't just infect your reasoning, it rewires how you make decisions. You hear about a plane crash and start fearing flying, even though the statistical risk is vanishingly small. You hear that a certain group commits a type of crime and believe it's typical, ignoring the vast base rate that proves otherwise. Your mind grabs the story, the headline, the anecdote, and throws out the math. The base rate fallacy distorts justice, fuels prejudice, and wrecks logic. It's why people fall for scams, why doctors misdiagnose, why investors panic, why truth gets buried beneath emotion. Because the numbers whisper calmly, but the details scream. And in that noise, you forget that what feels likely isn't always what is likely. Your fear isn't fact. Your instincts aren't accuracy. And when you ignore the base rate, you're not making a smart guess. You're gambling with illusion. Self-serving bias. Self-serving bias is the deeply rooted illusion that inflates your successes and deflects your failures, not to deceive others, but to protect yourself. When things go right, it's because you're smart, talented, and deserving. When they go wrong, it's because of bad luck, unfair treatment, or someone else's mistake. It's not just a story you tell the world. It's the one you whisper to yourself to survive. You ace a test and think, of course, I worked hard, I'm brilliant. You fail the next one and say, the questions were unfair. You get the promotion and believe you earned every bit of it. You're passed over and convince yourself your boss is biased or blind. It's not that you're lying, it's that your ego is holding the steering wheel, terrified of what might happen if it admits weakness, incompetence, or fault. This illusion is comforting, but dangerous. It keeps you emotionally safe, but intellectually stagnant. If every win is proof of your greatness and every loss is someone else's fault, how can you grow? How can you improve when failure never truly belongs to you? Self-serving bias doesn't just protect your self-esteem, it distorts your relationships. You blame others before blaming yourself. You assume you're more rational, more deserving, more moral than those around you. It's how resentment blooms, how learning stalls, how accountability dies. The hardest truth to swallow is that you are both the hero and the problem in your story. And until you break through this illusion, until you own your part in your own pain, you will keep repeating the same mistakes, always wondering why the world seems so unfair. Egocentric bias. Egocentric bias is the deeply human illusion that the world revolves around you, not out of arrogance, but because your own experience is the loudest, most vivid voice in your head. It's the belief that your actions are more noticed, your pain more unique, your contributions more significant, and your intentions more obvious than they really are. You walk into a room and feel like everyone's watching you, judging you, thinking about you. They're not. They're too busy thinking about themselves, but your brain doesn't realize that. It assumes the spotlight is always on. You remember your role in a group project more clearly than anyone else's. You overestimate how much people remember your mistakes or your victories. You assume others understand what you meant because you knew your intentions, forgetting they can't hear your thoughts. This illusion doesn't stem from vanity. It comes from perspective. You live inside your mind. You feel every thought, every insecurity, every burst of joy. And because your reality is built from the inside out, it's hard to grasp that others don't see, hear, or feel the same. So you misjudge. You overclaim credit. You underappreciate help. You expect people to just know how much effort you gave, how much something meant to you, or how much you're hurting. Because you know. Egocentric bias distorts relationships, warps communication, and feeds resentment. It makes you feel unseen, unappreciated, misunderstood, when in truth, others are simply caught in the same illusion, trapped in their own perspective, believing you should see them. And until you break that cycle, no one sees clearly, including you. Actor-observer bias. Actor-observer bias is the deceptive illusion that lets you excuse your own behavior while holding others fully accountable for theirs. When you mess up, it's because of the situation, the stress, the pressure, the circumstances. But when they mess up, it's because of who they are, their character, their flaws, their choices. And just like that, you become the exception while they become the example. You snap at someone and think, I was exhausted, I didn't mean it. But when someone snaps at you, they're rude, they always do this. You cut corners because you're overwhelmed. But when your coworker does it, they're lazy. You ghost someone because life got chaotic. But when you're ghosted, you assume they're heartless. The same behavior looks completely different depending on who's doing it, and whether you're living it or watching it. This illusion isn't just about bias. It's about self-protection. Seeing ourselves through the lens of context helps us stay intact, but it keeps us from real accountability. And judging others without their context makes us feel superior, but steals our empathy. It turns every conflict into a one-sided story where we are always the misunderstood protagonist and they are always the villain. Actor-observer bias creates a divide between how we experience life and how we interpret it in others. It feeds resentment, damages relationships, and blinds us to our own patterns. Because as long as you think your actions are justified while theirs are unforgivable, you'll never see the truth, that most people are just like you, flawed, human, and fighting invisible battles you never even noticed. Self-referencing effect. The self-referencing effect is the captivating illusion that information connected to you is more important, more memorable, and more real than anything else. It's the quiet bias that makes your name snap you to attention in a crowd, your birthday stick in your mind more than any historical date, and your personal story feel more valid than someone else's truth. When you read a book, you remember the part that reminded you of your childhood. When you hear a speech, the line that echoes your own struggle lingers longer than the rest. When you meet someone, you remember the detail that mirrors your life, a shared hometown, a similar fear, a familiar dream. The brain is always scanning for a connection to you, and once it finds it, it lights up, harder, brighter, deeper. This illusion doesn't just make you remember, it makes you believe. You trust information more when it relates to your experience. You care more when the cause hits close to home. You give more weight to facts that confirm your narrative. It's not always selfish. It's how the brain organizes chaos. The world is too big, too fast, too much. So your mind centers you as the anchor, as the meaning maker. But that anchor can drag you down. It can make you overlook other people's realities. It can make someone else's pain seem less significant just because it doesn't reflect your own. It's the subtle trap of believing something matters less when it doesn't touch you, when in truth, your perspective is just one tiny thread in a much bigger human story. And if all you remember is what reflects you, you risk forgetting what connects you. Choice overload. Choice overload is the paralyzing illusion that more options lead to better decisions, when in reality, they often lead to anxiety, regret, and a gnawing fear of missing out. The more choices you have, the more pressure you feel to make the perfect one. And the moment you choose, every other option starts whispering, "What if I was better?" You walk into a store to buy a simple bottle of shampoo, but now there are 20 kinds, for volume, for curls, for shine, for color-treated hair, for hydration, for scalp balance. You freeze, you start researching, you second-guess, you walk out with nothing or grab one at random, then wonder if you picked wrong. It doesn't stop at shampoo. It's careers, partners, streaming shows, diets, lifestyles, and the illusion tells you the best is out there if you choose carefully enough. But the more options you face, the heavier the burden becomes. You don't feel freedom, you feel fear. You worry you'll choose the lesser thing and regret it forever. Even after you decide, satisfaction fades, because now you're haunted by everything you didn't choose. Regret sharpens, doubt lingers. What was supposed to be empowering becomes exhausting. Choice overload doesn't just steal your peace, it poisons your joy. It convinces you that happiness lies in optimization, not contentment. And while you obsess over making the right choice, you forget that no choice is perfect, but many can be enough. Until you learn that, you'll keep chasing the illusion that the next decision will finally quiet the noise, but the noise comes from within. Reactance. Reactance is the explosive illusion that your freedom is under threat, even when it isn't, and the instinctive rebellion that flares up when someone tries to control, restrict, or pressure you. It's the primal voice that screams, "Don't tell me what to do," even when what's being asked might actually be good for you. It's not logic, it's defiance, a psychological revolt against the feeling of being cornered. You're told to wear a seatbelt, and part of you resists, not because you want to die, but because you want the choice to be yours. A parent tells a teenager not to date someone, and suddenly that forbidden love becomes irresistible. A partner asks you to change a habit gently, and you snap. This is who I am, even if deep down you know they're right. It's not about the request. It's about the perceived loss of autonomy. Reactance is emotional armor. The moment you sense control, your mind fights back to protect your agency. You'll ignore good advice, reject help, even sabotage yourself, just to prove you're free. And the more forcefully someone pushes, the harder you push back. This illusion is why persuasion often fails, why ultimatums backfire, why people dig their heels in when confronted with facts. You don't just want to be right, you want to choose. And the moment someone tries to take that choice away, even subtly, you'll light a match just to feel the heat of your own control. Reactance doesn't care about outcomes, it cares about ownership. And unless you learn to recognize it, you'll keep mistaking resistance for strength, when sometimes it's just fear in rebellion's clothing. Affective forecasting error. Affective forecasting error is the painful illusion that you know exactly how you'll feel in the future, how happy you'll be when you finally get what you want, or how devastated you'll feel if your worst fear comes true. But the truth is, your predictions are almost always wrong, because the emotions you imagine are louder, brighter, more extreme than the ones you'll actually feel when the moment arrives. You think, if I land that job, I'll be fulfilled. You get it. The joy lasts a week. Then you're back to the grind. You think, if I lose them, I won't survive. But you do. You think winning, leaving, achieving, escaping will break or complete you. And it doesn't. Because your brain is terrible at understanding emotional durability. It underestimates your resilience and overestimates your need. This illusion drives almost everything. We chase things thinking they'll bring permanent happiness. We avoid risks, thinking they'll bring unbearable pain. We make choices from fear of future sadness or in pursuit of imagined bliss. But feelings fade, highs settle, lows pass, and what once seemed like everything becomes just another part of your story. Affective forecasting error doesn't just mislead you, it controls you. It keeps you waiting for joy in some future condition while you miss the beauty of now. It stops you from taking leaps of faith because you believe you couldn't handle the fall, but you could, and you have. The danger isn't in feeling too much, it's in thinking you know exactly what you'll feel, because when you live in imagined emotions, you forget how strong you really are. Mere exposure effect. The mere exposure effect is the quiet, creeping illusion that the more familiar something becomes, the more you like it, not because it's good, but because it's known. It's the brain's way of whispering, you've seen this before, it must be safe, it must be right. And over time, that familiarity becomes affection, preference, even love. You hear a song once and feel indifferent, but after the 10th listen, it's your favorite track. You pass by a stranger every day on your commute, and one day, you catch yourself feeling drawn to them. You see a logo, a face, a slogan over and over, and soon it feels trustworthy, simply because it's everywhere. You don't like it because it's better. You like it because your brain has stopped questioning it. This illusion stems from survival. In evolution, what's familiar doesn't kill you. What's new might. So the brain wires comfort into repetition. But in modern life, that wiring betrays you. You stay in toxic relationships because they feel familiar. You prefer average ideas over brilliant new ones because they feel safe. You vote for the face you've seen the most, not the one that speaks the truth. The mere exposure effect doesn't care about quality. It doesn't measure truth or meaning. It rewards repetition with emotion. And slowly, you become loyal to what's simply there, what's known, what's often. It's not just a marketing trick. It's a mental reflex. And unless you question why you feel drawn to something or someone, you might mistake comfort for connection and familiarity for love, when in reality, you're just falling for a face your brain saw too many times to ignore. Loss aversion. Loss aversion is the primal illusion that losing something hurts more than gaining the same thing feels good. It's the reason you'll cling to what you have, even if it's broken, toxic, or hollow, rather than risk the pain of letting go. Your brain is wired to fear loss like it's death, and that fear runs deeper than logic. You win $100 and smile. You lose $100 and feel sick. The thrill of gain fades fast, but the sting of loss lingers, echoes, gnaws. This illusion doesn't just affect money, it shapes how you love, how you work, how you live. You stay in a job you hate because quitting means losing stability. You stay in a relationship that's draining your soul because walking away feels like surrender. Even when the better path is clear, you hesitate because the pain of losing what's familiar feels heavier than the joy of gaining something new. Loss aversion feeds anxiety. It makes you overprotective, under-adventurous, paralyzed by potential regret. It convinces you that what if I lose matters more than what if I gain. And so you settle, you resist change, you hold on to things that are slowly killing you because at least they're yours. This illusion isn't weakness, it's ancient. Our ancestors who feared loss survived, but survival isn't the same as living. And unless you break free from this wiring, you'll keep mistaking fear for wisdom and caution for safety. Because sometimes losing something is the only way you'll ever make space for what your life truly needs. False memory effect. The false memory effect is the chilling illusion that you remember something clearly, vividly, emotionally, even though it never actually happened. Your mind isn't lying to you. It's reconstructing, filling in gaps, writing fiction with the authority of fact, and you believe it because it feels real. But feelings are not evidence, and in this illusion, your own brain becomes your most convincing liar. You swear you locked the door. You remember the conversation that never took place. You accuse someone of saying something they didn't, and you're not bluffing. You truly remember it that way. And when they deny it, you feel betrayed, gaslit. How could they deny what you so clearly see in your mind? Because what you see isn't truth. It's a story your brain created to make sense of your world. False memories aren't errors. They're adaptations. Your mind isn't a camera. It's a storyteller. Every time you recall a memory, you edit it slightly, influenced by suggestion, emotion, or bias. Someone asks, "Do you remember when we got lost that night?" And you didn't, but now part of you does. You picture it, you feel it, and your brain seals it in as real. This illusion breaks relationships. It causes wrongful convictions. It rewrites childhoods, rewires grief, reshapes identity. It means the thing you've been carrying for years, the wound, the betrayal, the confession, might not have happened the way you think it did, or at all. But the worst part, you'll never know, because the more you trust your memory as truth, the less you realize you're living in a reality that your own mind quietly, lovingly invented. Simpson's paradox. Simpson's paradox is the chilling illusion that numbers never lie, when in fact they sometimes scream lies wrapped in truth. It's a statistical mind trap where a trend appears in different groups of data but reverses when those groups are combined. And it shows just how easily facts can be manipulated into deception, even when they're technically true. Imagine two hospitals. In each one, a higher percentage of patients survive in Hospital A than in Hospital B. But when you combine the data from both hospitals, Hospital B suddenly looks better overall. Why? Because the groups weren't equal. One handled more critical patients. One dealt with simpler cases. The context changes the story, but the numbers alone don't tell you that. This illusion is everywhere. In school admissions, where women appear less successful until you break the data down by department. In workplace promotions, where one group seems overlooked until you see how many applied in each category. In medicine, politics, policing, economics, Simpson's paradox hides in the cracks, making injustice look fair and fairness look flawed. The danger lies in our blind trust of statistics. We crave simple conclusions. This is better, that is worse. But data without context is a loaded weapon. It can defend corruption, mask inequality, sell products, shape beliefs, destroy lives, all while sounding scientific. Simpson's paradox doesn't just twist truth, it shatters the illusion that logic will always save us, because even when the numbers are right, the story they tell might be completely terrifyingly wrong. Red herring effect. The red herring effect is the cunning illusion that leads your mind down a path that feels urgent, emotional, or important, only to realize too late that it was a distraction, a misdirection, a lie that feels like truth because it draws your focus away from what really matters. And the scariest part? You follow it willingly because it feels like the right thing to chase. You're in an argument and someone brings up something outrageous, an insult, a shocking anecdote, a wild accusation. Suddenly, the whole conversation shifts. You're defending yourself, reacting emotionally, lost in a side debate. You forget the original point. You forget what you were trying to say. The red herring did its job. It hijacked your attention and pulled you into the weeds. This illusion isn't just used in arguments. It infects media, politics, marketing, and even your own thoughts. A politician dodges a question about corruption by riling up the crowd with a moral outrage. A news outlet buries systemic issues beneath sensational drama. Your own brain distracts you from your deepest fears by focusing on surface-level anxiety. Instead of asking why you feel unfulfilled, you fixate on why someone didn't text back. The red herring effect doesn't just mislead, it derails, it manipulates urgency, it creates chaos in place of clarity, and the more emotionally charged the bait, the more likely you are to bite. This illusion thrives because it gives you something to feel instead of something to face. But chasing noise won't bring you truth. It only leaves you out of breath, far from where you started, and even further from where you needed to go. Overjustification Effect. The overjustification effect is the subtle illusion that when you reward someone for doing something they already enjoy, it will motivate them more. But in truth, it often destroys the very passion that made them love it in the first place. It's the moment a pure, internal joy becomes a transaction, and once that shift happens, something magical begins to die. A child who loves drawing for the thrill of creation begins receiving prizes for every picture. At first, it feels exciting, validation, praise, reward, but soon they stop drawing on their own. The spark dims. It's no longer about imagination. It's about getting something in return. And when the rewards disappear, so does the motivation. What once felt like play now feels like work. This illusion is everywhere. You write because it heals you until you're paid for it. And suddenly, deadlines, approval, and pressure replace the freedom that once fueled your voice. You go to the gym for clarity and strength until it becomes about likes, metrics, and appearance. You help others out of compassion until applause becomes the goal. The overjustification effect warps your relationship with passion. It turns play into performance, purpose into pressure. It teaches the mind that joy must be earned rather than felt. And the worst part? You might not notice it happening until one day you look at something you once loved and feel nothing. This illusion doesn't just silence creativity, it replaces it with a hollow hunger for validation. And unless you reclaim the original why, you risk living a life where everything is done for something, instead of because something inside you came alive. Authority bias. Authority bias is the deeply ingrained illusion that those in positions of power, those with titles, uniforms, fame, or status, must know better. It's the instinct to trust, obey, and even revere someone simply because they appear to have authority. And it's how we surrender our judgment without even realizing we've handed it over. A doctor gives a rushed diagnosis and you don't question it, even when something feels off. A manager makes a flawed decision and no one speaks up. A celebrity shares misinformation and thousands follow without checking facts. Not because the message made sense, but because the messenger wore the crown of credibility. This illusion is ancient. In times of danger or uncertainty, following a leader increased survival. So your brain still lights up when someone seems confident, commanding, or decorated. You assume they must know more, must be right, must be obeyed. But authority is not the same as wisdom, and confidence is not proof of truth. Authority bias doesn't just distort what we believe, it shapes how we behave. It silences doubt. It punishes skepticism. It convinces you that questioning power is disrespect, even when power is wrong. It's how atrocities are carried out with clean consciences, how abusive systems endure, how good people follow bad orders, telling themselves, I was just doing what I was told. The terrifying part, you often feel safe under authority, but that safety is borrowed and sometimes blinding, because when you stop thinking for yourself, someone else starts thinking for you, and if they lead you into darkness, you won't realize it until you're already there. Status quo bias. Status quo bias is the comforting illusion that what already exists, what's familiar, established, routine, is automatically better, safer, or more right than change. It's the mental reflex that makes you stay where you are, not because it's working, but because it's known. And the unknown, even if it holds freedom, feels like a threat. You keep using an outdated system at work because it's always been done this way. You stay in a draining relationship because starting over feels harder than surviving what you've settled into. You ignore better opportunities, ideas, and people, not because they're wrong, but because they're new. Your brain equates familiarity with comfort and comfort with value. This illusion whispers lies wrapped in logic. What you know is safer than what you don't. But safety isn't always good, and change isn't always danger. Still, status quo bias roots itself deep in your habits, in your identity, in the stories you tell yourself to justify staying still. Even when you're unhappy, it convinces you to protect the life that's hurting you, just because it's yours. It makes you overlook dysfunction, ignore alternatives, and cling to mediocrity. It turns fear into loyalty and apathy into rationalization. And the more you defend the current state of things, the more you convince yourself it must be right, because the pain of change feels worse than the pain of staying stuck. But here's the truth status quo bias hides. Just because it's familiar doesn't mean it's right, and sometimes the most dangerous place to be is exactly where you've always been, while everything inside you is begging you to move. Escalation of commitment. Escalation of commitment is the painful illusion that the more you've invested in something, a relationship, a career, a dream, the more you have to see it through. It convinces you that quitting would mean failure, weakness, or betrayal of everything you've already sacrificed. So you double down, you try harder, you lose more, all to avoid the unbearable truth. You might be chasing something that's already broken. You pour years into a failing business. Friends tell you to walk away, but you can't. You've given too much. You tell yourself, one more year, one more loan, one more chance. You stay in a relationship where the love has died, but the history still screams. You can't just give up now. You keep pursuing a goal that no longer excites you, because the version of you who started it would be ashamed if you stopped. This illusion is fueled by fear, pride, and ego. It whispers, if you quit now, everything you did was for nothing. So you convince yourself progress is just around the corner. You reframe failure as a temporary setback. You ignore signs. You silence instincts. You don't want to be wrong. You want to be right, so badly that you're willing to burn what's left to prove you were. Escalation of commitment traps you in suffering disguised as perseverance. It's loyalty twisted into self-destruction. It turns sunk costs into chains, and the longer you hold on, the harder it becomes to let go, because now your identity is wrapped around the thing that's falling apart, and you're not fighting for success anymore. You're fighting not to admit it's already gone. Appeal to emotion. The appeal to emotion is the deceptive illusion that if something feels right, it must be true. It's the moment when logic is hijacked by sensation, and your heart, not your head, becomes the judge of truth. It doesn't matter if the argument is flawed, biased, or completely false. If it stirs your fear, anger, guilt, or hope, it bypasses reason and feels real. A speech about safety makes you support a policy without understanding its consequences. A heartbreaking image makes you donate, even if the charity is corrupt. A politician triggers your rage or pride, and suddenly facts no longer matter. You've chosen a side. It's not manipulation in the obvious sense. It's seduction, because emotions move faster than thought. They strike first, and hard. This illusion is powerful because it doesn't look like a fallacy. It feels like conviction. It makes bad arguments feel righteous, and good ones feel hollow if they don't stir something inside you. And once your emotions are ignited, your mind becomes a lawyer for your feelings, building a case around what you want to believe, not what's real. The appeal to emotion is how con artists gain trust, how tyrants build loyalty, how disinformation spreads. It's why stories beat statistics, why outrage outshouts truth. It's not that feelings are wrong, they're vital. But when they become the foundation for belief, they become a weapon, one that turns reason into a hostage. And the most terrifying part, you'll never know it's happening. Because when emotion speaks, it speaks in your own voice, and it tells you you're right, even when you're not. Appeal to ignorance. The appeal to ignorance is the subtle, insidious illusion that if something hasn't been proven false, it must be true, or if it hasn't been proven true, it must be false. It's the mental sleight of hand that replaces evidence with emptiness, and then pretends that emptiness is proof. You hear someone say, "No one can prove aliens don't exist, so they must," or "There's no evidence that this drug causes harm, so it must be safe." You may even tell yourself, "They never admitted they lied, so they must have told the truth." It sounds logical at first, but it's a hollow logic, one built not on what's known, but on what's missing. This illusion thrives in uncertainty. It weaponizes the unknown. It turns silence into consent, absence into permission, mystery into meaning. But ignorance isn't evidence, it's a void. And if you're not careful, that void can be filled with anything: conspiracy theories, reckless decisions, blind trust, or dangerous denial. The appeal to ignorance doesn't just distort how we argue, it clouds how we think. It allows people to manipulate fear, avoid responsibility, dodge scrutiny. It gives you permission to believe something just because it hasn't been disproven yet. But the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence or presence. And perhaps most dangerously, this illusion makes you feel certain in the dark. You cling to what you can't disprove like it's a lifeline, when in reality, it's just fog. And the more tightly you hold on to it, the further you drift from truth, not because you were lied to, but because you mistook silence for a signal. Salience bias. Salience bias is the illusion that what stands out the most, what's brightest, loudest, most dramatic, is what matters most. It's the mind's instinct to chase what captures attention, not what deserves it. And in doing so, we miss what's quiet, subtle, hidden, often the real danger, the real truth, or the real solution. You see a plane crash on the news and suddenly fear flying, even though car accidents kill far more people every day. You focus on the one violent crime in your city, forgetting the hundreds of silent kindnesses that went unreported. You obsess over a single mistake someone made because it was public, dramatic, while ignoring their years of integrity. What's visible becomes what's important. What's loud becomes what's true. This illusion is amplified by the world we live in. Media, social networks, politics, they all fight for your attention. And what grabs attention fastest? Fear, outrage, shock, tragedy, scandal. Your brain locks onto it like a spotlight, convinced that if it glows this bright, it must be meaningful. But salience is not significance. It's just visibility. Salience bias shapes what you fear, what you value, what you believe. It makes you chase trends over truths. It makes you miss the root cause while obsessing over the symptom. It distorts risk, amplifies fear, and skews priorities. And the scariest part? You feel informed. You feel aware. But what you're seeing is just what was easiest to notice, not what was most important to know. Because the real truth often doesn't scream. It whispers. And salience bias makes you deaf to anything that doesn't shine. Truthiness. Truthiness is the eerie illusion that something feels true, so it must be true, not because it's supported by facts, evidence, or logic, but because it resonates. It fits your worldview. It aligns with your gut. It triggers a deep emotional yes in your chest. And once that happens, you stop questioning. You stop looking. You believe. It's hearing a claim like, people are lazier these days, and nodding along, not because you've seen the data, but because it sounds right. It feels right. It matches what you've been noticing, what you've already suspected. You read a headline that confirms your fears, your biases, your beliefs, and instead of checking it, you share it. Because truthiness doesn't demand proof. It only demands agreement. This illusion is seductive because it simplifies the world. It makes your emotions the compass. It tells you that your intuition is infallible, that if something feels off, then it is. But the human gut is not a truth detector. It's a story magnet. It grabs what fits and rejects what doesn't. It makes you feel wise while leading you into confirmation, not clarity. Truthiness is how misinformation spreads like wildfire. It's how slogans become convictions, how empty rhetoric becomes belief systems, how facts become optional when feelings are overwhelming. It doesn't matter if something is true, it matters if it feels true enough. And that's the danger. In a world full of noise, truthiness lets you shut your eyes, open your heart, and walk confidently in the wrong direction, believing not what is, but what feels best to believe.